So what's the situation with our remote member?
Well, Richard is with us via phone there.
Okay. So
Can you hear us, Richard?
Yes, I can.
Okay, hang on.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order then.
Good.
And let's do a roll call. And Jerry, do you want to be the first?
Sure. Jerry Herman.
Okay. Bob Roth. Brian Boyce.
Doug DeHart.
Shaw Spady. Ginger Redlinger.
Pete Walter, staff.
And on the phone, we
Richard
have
Craven.
Richard Craven.
Good deal.
See if I can turn up the volume on the phone real quick. Hang on a second.
Okay.
Richard, can you speak?
Yes,
That's a little
I
loud.
can
Lovely.
hear you loud and clear.
Oh yeah, coming through good.
Yeah, he's clear now.
Okay, that's better.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Okay. So our first item is the Union Pacific Trolley Bridge site restoration, and Martin Montalvo has canceled, but Pete's going to go ahead and try to present on that.
Sure. Okay, yeah. So Martin Montalvo, who is our operations manager for Public Works, who you've met, has presented on other items. He's been the city's day-to-day project manager in coordination with the city manager's office, monitoring the on-site restoration that Union Pacific has been doing since the trolley bridge was removed. And this is a bit of a sort of a, because of the restoration having to be done in response to an emergency, there was a contingency fund set up to during the time that Union Pacific was on site, and they were Martin was managing all of the on-site activities with respect to the pathway and the public safety and the temporary closure of the pathway. And Union Pacific did a lot of grading and site restoration work out there. They had CH2M Hill prepare plans in which I have hard copies here. And they also were required to both attend a pre-application conference summary with the planning department, which they held on the 21st of March, and following the pre-application were required to file a natural resource overlay district application as well, knowing that they needed to restore the site as soon as possible, and they have already completed the work, but we're still going through the comment period on the land use application. So the plans that they submitted, prepared by CH2M Hill, have been put up on our city website. We've done a public comment and notice period, and we'll be taking comments through the 22nd of May. The contractor that went through on the site was also required to obtain a grading permit from Public Works and do all of the erosion control permit. They were doing in-stream water work as well, so they needed the permit separately from the Department of State Lands and from the Corps of Engineers for the in-stream water work. And where they did the landing area for the bridge actually affected 2 tax lots, so it affected the Urban Renewal Commission's land next to the treatment plant, as well as the treatment plant itself. And the majority of the impacts were on the treatment plant property. So you'll see, as you've been down there, there was a PGE vault and an overhead power line there. And then to the left of that, if you're standing on the bike path, was the area that they impacted and had to restore to from the bike path down to the river high water mark. And I think they actually went down below the high water mark with the willow plantings. So you'll see as you go out there, it's all natives that they used. They planted according to the planting densities required in the Natural Resource Overlay District, and then they put down erosion control fabric, and I think they used a native plant mix, seeding mix underneath that and over the top of it. And they're required to post the bond or the restoration bond, the 2-year monitoring and maintenance period, which they've basically required to show that at the end of 2 years, at least 80% of the initially planted vegetation is established. And the city has taken on the responsibility of that monitoring and maintenance period. So we're going to be contracting out the replacement for the next 2 years. If any plants die, Public Works will take care of that contract, and then filing the reports and things of that nature. And if you've been down there to see it, I've been down there a couple of times since the work was completed, and it's obviously a very high visibility area. So far, we've heard nothing but good things from people about the work that's been done. The knoll that was there, the high point, did change a little bit. You know, I think the location of that changed. But they tried to restore the original topography as closely as they could to what it was before. So they had what they did before they started cutting the bridge up, and I think you might have heard this from Martin, was take a tree inventory, the days that they were down there, and they had to do it. So they did the tree inventory, and then they based their restoration based on what they knew was out there before they cut them down. And then and took a topographic survey as well. So, if you like, I can take you through the site plans, and we'll just show you that. But,
Hey, could we have maybe just a couple of questions
Sure.
just before we forget?
Yeah.
I think one question is, was there any documentation of any damage to the stream bed? I mean, we're talking a lot about the terrestrial habitat. Was there any documentation and any rehabilitation or anything?
to the stream bed?
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that. I'd have to get back to you on that
Yeah,
from Martin. Yeah. Yeah.
I would be surprised if they did. They did get everything out they could find.
Right.
You know that. But
Yeah.
I was saying about maybe like paint chips or, just
If they found debris along the abutting bank that wasn't natural, they hauled it out of there.
And they also sent divers down and
Yeah.
looked underwater for chunks of
Okay.
concrete.
Right.
I don't know if they looked for paint chips. You know.
Right.
well, no, but I was just trying to.
But anything within reason they did.
And then we did ask them to try to replace as much large woody debris back between the plantings as they could. They were using very heavy machinery, and so when they hauled a lot of the dirt out of there and put it back, some of the bigger chunks, they couldn't save all of them because they had to do some backfill and things. But they tried and you can see as you walk through the site, you can see that some of the large pieces are been hand placed throughout the site, which is really good.
Yeah. The only comment I have is everything's native there except the dogwoods. They
Yeah.
used eastern dogwoods. Probably.
Eastern. Okay.
Yeah, it's real easy to tell them apart when they're in bloom.
Huh, we thought it was a native.
The eastern dogwood has a notched tip to the leaf, the flower petals,
Okay.
whereas the native one has a point. So they're very easy to tell apart.
It was supposed to be a native.
I imagine it was. But the difference is they grow about the same width, but the eastern dogwood is less than half the height of the native.
Okay.
And same flower, other than that detail
Well-
of the
It's on
tip.
page 2.
It's on page 2.
Yeah, at the bottom. Change roses to salmonberry, change big leaf maple to Pacific dogwood.
Pacific dogwood, so it's on the plan.
Yeah.
Well, they'll be held for that.
Um,
Yeah,
You know, it's,
they'll be held to the Pacific dogwood.
yeah.
You'll have to
they-
replace it.
You know,
Yeah.
they're so close that David Douglas didn't figure out that it was a different species. They're very close, but the size is the big difference,
Okay.
and that detail of the flowers.
Yeah.
Pete, the other question was, given the prevalence of documentation of beaver issues in the vicinity,
Yeah.
how are we looking at keeping the beavers from going to the
Well, that'll
Schneiders?
be on the agenda a little later.
No. I'm not talking about that beaver issue. What I'm
Okay.
talking
This
about
beaver issue.
is with the replanting. It's kind of like setting up a whole buffet for nutrient beavers.
Fence.
I believe
Well,
when the
they are doing
Not from the
fence.
river.
when the
It's fenced
bioengineered
from
swale
the
was
people's
done.
side.
But that's
yes,
not
that's
going to
the point.
stop the
You're right. I guess
beaver
that's
from
right.
coming
Oh,
up.
that's
I don't recall
to
that.
keep the beavers
Yeah.
from being interrupted. No.
Yeah, there's a small wall,
Since-
but it's not
Yeah.
it's not going to keep the beavers.
Since I'm the historian here, and I have a deeper memory than some of you, the bioengineered swale was done with sleeves around every tree to make sure that we didn't lose them during that time that Richard Craven was speccing that work back
Yep.
in 1980. Okay, and that's why, I'm sorry, 1990, I'm sorry, that's why very little loss occurred, to answer your question, Bob. And that's the kind of thing that should be done, you know,
Yep.
in any planting project near the river.
Can we require that, or is it too late?
We need to, that's a good condition to add.
One other thing,
Yeah.
it said here that in the original report that the city, and you mentioned it, the city was going to do the maintenance and monitoring, but
I
it
need to
act-
check with
But
Martin
it says
on
the
that.
applicant has not developed the project and they want the city to do it. And then on the next page, it says that the applicant should provide a detailed monitoring maintenance plan report as a condition of approval. But I'm wondering why the city would take on the maintenance and monitoring of that situation. Why? I mean,
Very
are
good
they
question.
paying us to
Well,
do that? Or?
yeah, that's the thing. It's contingent on them paying us to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
going to include watering?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing, and these are great suggestions, is the replacement on the dogwood. Make sure that we get the right protections on the plants for the beaver herbivory, and then yeah, that's excellent.
Pete,
Yeah.
the plant skid product again is a biodegradable, sterilized, dried blood that's applied, and it's waterproof, and it's not a hard structure. Because I mean, if you put wire around or do a whole fence up, the water comes up, and that fence is going to act like a sieve and just catch all the leaves and all the branches, and it's going to make a mess.
That's a good idea.
Okay. But I think some of the larger plantings will that work instead of it?
Well, basically, the
Yeah.
sterilized pig's blood, what it does, acts as a deterrent for herbivores and stuff.
Yeah.
They don't like the taste, they don't like
Uh-huh.
the smell, and they stay away.
Uh-huh.
So you can apply it, you don't have the same issues you do when you put structures up in an area where you get
Sounds-
active water.
You have to reapply it from time to time, probably.
Well, it lasts for months, kind of. It's like a scab on the plants.
Okay. Okay.
Plant skid.
Plant skid?
Yeah.
Okay.
They've got whole websites, the whole thing. Used to sell it, actually.
Yeah, I think, we don't want to invest a lot of money doing replacement, obviously, of species, so that's, if we can spend a little bit of money on that.
It's easy to apply. It's powdered. You mix it up with water.
Right.
You can use a sprayer.
Okay. Now, if you want to make a formal comment on this with those, and I would recommend that we do before the comment period ends, just send me it in email and I'll put it in to David Evans and Associates, who has written the draft and is waiting for comments.
So,
Should we
Yeah.
direct our chair to
Yeah.
do that for the committee? To put our comments together and make a recommendation on behalf of the committee, or should we do it individually?
That's up to you. What do you
I'd be
think?
glad to do it. I just have to make sure I know which comments we're doing. There's the dogwoods, there's the plant skid,
Yeah.
and then there was, so we found out that the city is being financially remunerated for doing this,
Yeah.
and I assume the city is doing a good job on asking for enough, you know.
Well, I think you'd like. It sounds like you'd ask for clarification on
Yeah.
what the city is doing with respect to monitor and maintenance. So, pending that information from Public Works,
Yeah.
that you would make those additional comments.
Hey, I've got a
yeah.
question. I mean, if you have limited resources, and even if the city's getting reimbursed, it still seems as if people are working a 37.5-hour or 40-hour a week. If they're getting paid by the railroad to do something, there's something else that gets bumped off their schedule, just because I don't imagine that people are working overtime to get the
Yeah.
extra stuff done. It'd be important to kind of know what's getting bumped, because if they had a work plan before and something's not going to get done.
Well, yeah, part of that may be answered possibly by the fact that we're contracting it.
Okay.
But I don't know if this is taking up a lot of Martin's time.
Sure.
And I assume, and we'll need to document this, that the city's contract with whoever's doing the replacement and monitoring and maintenance part of it is pretty much all on them, so that staff is
Okay.
freed up. But I think we need to provide details of that for you. And I'm sure Martin would be happy to do that. Okay. So if you could make a fourth recommendation in that regard
Yeah,
in your email, just so I don't lose the thread.
right.
And that would be good. And if anything else comes up, comment period's open.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know, generally it looked pretty good, you know, the spacing was, you can lose 20%, no problem, with the spacing they gave, so, and,
right. Now, the other factor that is somewhat related to this, well, is related to this project, one of the comments that is from the opposite neighbor in Gladstone, because once the trees were removed, the view to the the sewage plant suddenly was there, right?
Yeah.
And so the city manager has received complaints about that, and in response to that, we're attempting to address that through the planting of larger trees, maybe not within the impact area itself, possibly on the fringes of that, in order to provide a visual and aesthetic screen.
yeah,
And
those
yeah.
red alders that were planted will grow quite fast. So,
Yeah.
you know, but it'll still take several years before
Yeah.
they're high enough to block their view.
I mean, yeah, in comparison to some of the large maples and Douglas firs that I think were originally there,
Yeah.
you know, and the city manager would love to see some large trees planted in there as well. So we're going to try to figure out a way to do that. Yeah.
Okay.
You know, I think screening of the sewer plant has always been an issue, whether you're talking about the Cove development or you know, anything around there and the bike path and everything else. So it's something that we need to pay attention to.
What's interesting, it never came up to paint it in more pleasing colors than
Yeah.
World War II bunker gray.
Yeah, you know,
How
I
about
was
a nice
around
city logo?
for that
The
master
smiling
plan.
Camouflage.
Flowing water, things like that.
I think if we could get the sewer plant to do a little more different color, or maybe some green roofs or walls. They did do a green roofs, but that doesn't extend down the side. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, some other sewer plants have dressed their plants up a lot more than these folks did. So,
I do have 2 hard copies of these plans. If you'd like to check them out, come by, stop by anytime you want. Alex Dupy, who is my contact at David Evans and Associates, is the one who's writing the staff report. His comments come from their water resource wetland environmental specialist at David Evans and Associates. So they go out on the site, they make sure that, you know, what's been put on the plans has actually been planted, and they kind of are a third-party review because the city doesn't have an environmental person. So that's their role, and they're an on-call contract year to year for work. Okay. Any other questions about it at this point? Okay.
okay.
Thank you.
And do we have any citizen comments? I haven't got the
If you want to sit on the left, so that that mic can still be used, if you want to sit there.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
sure.
I'll come back.
Thanks, Donna.
Do you want me to hand those out?
Yeah, I think I brought 6.
While she's setting up, I wanted to note that I read through the, what they'd submitted, and the mitigation, or David Heil noted that 90% of that area is covered with English ivy
It was originally.
and I
It's
thought-
gone.
Yeah, and if it's all gone now, or there might be a future project that we have an ivy pulling party. or
Yeah, we
something.
need to make sure it doesn't
Yeah.
just come back.
Yeah.
And,
That might be a good project
yeah,
in the future.
okay, this,
Oh, no. There you go.
I think that's the same. Are these all the same, Christina? Oh, sorry.
Everyone should have 7
I've got the
handouts.
highlighted.
Yes.
Oh, that's just on the back side.
Oh, okay.
The map is on the back.
All right. Okay,
There's 7 separate handouts,
There it is.
thank you. Okay, good, thanks.
and they're all in order.
thank you.
All right.
Okay, go ahead and give us your name
Okay.
and you've got basically 3 minutes, so go.
I'll introduce myself, but before you start the time, I do want to tell you something. Christine Kaczynski, I live in unincorporated Clackamas County. I gave each one of you 7 handouts, and they're in order of my highlighted testimony to the City Commission of April 2nd. Okay? So this is actually a 5-minute presentation, so I'm going to go
Go
through
ahead.
as much as I can.
Yeah.
I've been doing a lot of landslide work lately, and what started me on it was a land use development at between 615 and 707 4th Avenue. And I've given you a Dogami map which shows that this home is going to be right inside of a big landslide. I began to wonder if the city was following its regulations. And so then on my testimony for the South End Concept Plan, I've given you a copy of an email dated February 20th, 2007. This is an email from the city engineer stating that she's serious and committed to developing suitable geologic hazard requirements. She goes on to say, in an effort to improve the existing code, the city staff is working with Dogami to create a plan for the hazard susceptibility to landslides, that this would be low, moderate, and high susceptibility. Then on February 19th, 2008, I sent an email to the city engineer asking for an update. Your next handout is February 20th, 2008. This is another email from the city engineer stating that the public should expect 2 stages of code changes. The second stage will be a rewrite of the geologic hazard codes to implement the new risk-based maps. We will be using the City of Salem code as a template. I ask here what happened in 2008. The second stage of geologic hazards did not get written, and now here we are 8 years later and they still haven't been written. Because there's been a lot of mention about the City of Salem hazard regulations, I have given you just a little brief handout on their graduated response table that they came up with when they worked with FEMA. I gave you the website where you can find the entire PDF. I'm also giving you a copy of page 5 of the GRI Geological Preliminary Study done for Park Place Plan, where GRI recommended that the city regulate slopes of 15% or greater, and we're still at 25% or greater, and I wondered why we hadn't changed that. I put some information in here about the Holly Lane landslides occurred on slopes of less than 16%, the slides in the Street of Dreams on less than 5%. The New Elk Creek Apartments slides have occurred on minimal percentage. I asked the city then, why are you only regulating slopes of 25% or greater?
I encouraged Oregon City to follow the suggestions outlined by their city engineer in 2008, who suggested that the City of Salem's code would be a good template for the city to follow, since this is known to be the most comprehensive plan in the state. I urged the city to keep their promise to the people and see that these long overdue regulations are written to protect the people in the community. And I'm just passing all this information on to you. Another map I gave you is a Dogami map, and it's part of the South End Concept Plan showing Butel Road and Forest Ridge Road and Deer Run Road, showing the area and the huge landslides that are right there. And in my mind, I wondered, where is all the drainage going to go? I hope it's not going to go into the landslides, which will reactivate them. So I've tried to give you as much information as I've had and that I've given to the city. Landslides and steep slopes are so much a part of natural resources. I'm always talking about the rivers and the lakes or the creeks and the small creatures and what we're doing to protect our natural resources for our future. And so I felt that you needed this as the Natural Resource Committee to study. And when you talk to the city about upgrading the landslide regulations, I hope that this information is valuable to you.
Before you leave, you did a lot of commentary and a lot of support materials here that you gave to us in under 5 minutes, I would say, under 3 minutes. My question, I guess, is, so in the last 8 years, the changes that you thought were going to happen and others concerned about these things have not occurred? To what code level?
Well, when you look at the template I gave you from the City of Salem, it shows how they regulate the risk in their slopes. They've gone throughout their whole city and regulated each slope area as to a low, moderate, or a high risk.
Right.
Along with low, moderate, and high goes either no geological review or a particular geological review that would go along with development in that particular area. And we haven't done that yet. And I'm assuming maybe it wasn't done because the new susceptibility maps just came out the end of last year. But now that the city has the maps, I'm encouraging them to write this second stage. And the reason that I'm encouraging so highly, a lot of these people are going to move in to this South End plan years from now. But this is our the map that I gave you anyway that shows Butel and
Yes,
Forest Ridge.
yes.
Some of these people are going to live in what you call a landslide area. They can't get insurance for losses due to landslides. Are they going to know that when they buy that house? Probably not. Who's going to tell them?
Christine, I have a question. The whole issue about takings, if a city says, or a jurisdiction says to a private landowner, you can't build on your land, theoretically the landowner can turn around and say, that's a takings, you have to pay me for the loss of use of my land. How did the city of Salem deal with that kind of a situation, or do you know of anyone who has, or do you have any thoughts about that?
I haven't been through their entire PDF, and I would love to go down there for a day or two and just study what they've done. You know, really, and maybe that's something that Oregon City will do eventually. I don't know what the powers to be will do.
It's my understanding that it's coming up. I'm not sure how quickly. Maybe Pete knows.
Yeah, I've got some information. There was a Bill Burns from Dogami held a meeting at the Development Services Building for cities and counties in Clackamas County. Well, it's cities in Clackamas County last week. So I think it was about 50 people or so there, including some planning commissioner, Paul Espy, who is a Lake Oswego planner. And so they're presenting the publication now, the slope susceptibility mapping that's just been published. And the Department of Land Conservation and Development is partnering with, are they going to develop an administrative rulemaking process for this? they are saying, DLCD is saying that they're going to issue in late 2015 a directive to Goal 7 for whatever cities that don't reference these maps or have adequate protections to do so, and then the cities that have existing code and policies and maps in place, they may just make reference to the susceptibility mapping if they're already deemed to be in compliance with Goal 7. But that's last week. If we work backwards in time from there, the next most recent thing was this South End Concept Plan adoption process, where the Planning Commission and the City Commission did hear a lot of testimony about this. And essentially as a condition for the South End Concept Plan, prior to annexation, it was stated, and it is in part of the ordinance, that prior to annexation of any land within the concept plan area, that it would be reviewed against this publication. And then if you go back a little bit further in time, earlier in time, 2010, the City Commission, Planning Commission adopted a map which set up a buffer zone of 50 foot from a 25% slope, and then a 200-foot buffer review area from an ancient or any known landslide area that's mapped by Dogami. Also, an applicant is required to reference any subsequent mapping for the Dogami mapping for the Oregon City area. Now, it doesn't list the new publication specifically, and that will be a code text amendment we'll make, is to reference this new susceptibility mapping. Bill Burns said that, you've got your steep slide potential and your shallow slide potential, these mathematical algorithms that they've come up with based on theirs. And the South End Concept Plan map area shows the shallow slide potential areas. There's a few that come up as new, right? Mm-hmm. And then some of the deep slide potential areas are already mapped within the existing overlay map that was adopted in 2010. That being said, it's a great resource. We're going to continue to incorporate these changes into the code. Going back to the Park Place Concept Plan in 2008, when Tova Peltz and GRI did their sort of broad-scale geotechnical review. They didn't do like site-specific development review because they didn't have a development to review. They were like looking at underlying geological conditions, and they made recommendations for types of code amendments, which Christine alluded to. And some of those code amendments made it into the code. The slope susceptibility mapping wasn't yet developed, and so yeah, I agree. We need to follow through and include that now that it's ready. And I think we're going to be doing it much earlier than DLCD mandates that we do. Mm-hmm. However, it needs to be done, and so I think we're right on the curve as far as that goes. John Lewis is well aware of this issue as well. Public Works. Mm-hmm. Alita Froman Goodrich, our city engineer, is also, was at the meeting last week. All the Public Works Department guys who have anything to do with development review in this capacity were at that Bill Burns meeting last week, and I think there were a lot of good conversations about it. The question of Salem came up as well. It's like, is Department of Land Conservation one of the things that they're going to do is develop a model code, which you can either adopt in its entirety or adapt to your local conditions. And they're going to do that based on input from local jurisdictions. And if Salem has the best code, then I think a big part of that model code is going to be based on that. Correct me if I'm wrong, Christine, but I think what I understand from the Salem code is that it not only looks at the susceptibility mapping, but it adds a numeric value based on proximity to known, what do they call them? Known buildings and structures that have emergency and hazard responsibilities. So part of a hazard mitigation plan. Hazard mitigation plan is a separate type of plan that is voluntary, and the city has one. We're kind of piggybacking on the Clackamas County emergency response plan. Hazard mitigation plan goes even further because it looks at natural hazards and how you respond to them, but it's not mandatory. It's something that a city or a county would develop as an additional level of protection for what happens during a tornado, what happens during an earthquake, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, so. Yeah.
There's a really huge landslide taking place in Astoria right now. Talking about there's a huge area coming down, and with properties being divided up, a lot of times that people develop kind of like the toes of some of these landslides in certain ways. The development's only taking place on their property, but the effect of cutting that off can cause the whole hills to slide on a massive scale. Is there any kind of special consideration being given to that, understanding of the gravity?
These buffers are from the toes and crests. They're not just at the top of it. So it states in the code the toe or crest of any of these areas. An example is Waterboard Park. There's a lot of record there that a fellow wants to build on. He's got to go through the complete Type 2 geologic hazard review, and he's still getting his reports together for that before he can get any kind of building permit. But that's a toe, right? And it's an active landslide. It's mapped. It's boulders and things.
That just brings me back to my question.
Yeah.
How can the city say no?
Well, there are, if we say no and we get challenged on it or sued, the code specifies density restrictions. It gives you the ability to, if you have a lot of record that was legally platted, it gives you 1 unit. And that's regardless of whether you have 6 tax lots under common ownership or 1 tax lot under ownership. And it states very clearly that in areas over 35%, and that density restriction is based on slope. Or hazard. It basically prohibits any development, but if an applicant can show that they would lose all economic use of the property, and they have the burden of proving that, then they get 1 house. And so I don't think we've been in a position where we've gotten into, have you lost all economic use of the property? They basically defer to the 1 unit thing, provided you go through a Type 2 land use review process and show that the construction standards are met and the mitigation standards are met and the peer review that's required has to be followed. So a lot of these geologic hazard applications become so complicated that people won't touch those areas. They just won't. They'll go elsewhere. And they're already fairly cheap pieces of land. But sometimes you'll see that it doesn't matter how cheap they are, it doesn't pencil to build there. You'll see that.
Out of curiosity, Pete, what's the mechanism by which insurers and lending institutions are made aware of this? Because, of course, if they are aware of that and aren't willing to insure or finance the spot, the development's probably done before it starts anyway.
That was one of the questions that they posed to DLCD. Several jurisdictions had it. What can DLCD do in terms of providing model templates for disclosure for local jurisdictions to follow? And what obligation and liability does a jurisdiction have having done that beyond what the code states? So it's one of those, it's still an open question. As far as, and yeah, it was like, well, what do we tell people about earthquake insurance in Oregon? Can you get it? Under what circumstances can you get it? Personal experience, I had a neighbor on my street, and I live near Mount Tabor. They got earthquake insurance, but only because they hired one of these companies that pins your foundation to your walls. And I don't know what the limitations of that insurance are. They may not be a very comprehensive policy. It may only refer to shaking events or something like that rather than slides. I don't know. But those are some of the questions that come up. So I'm going to do that.
Yeah,
Mr. Chair, Christine's done a lot of work on this, and it just seems to me that we should reserve some time in a future meeting to spend a little more time on the subject. And I'm just trying to look at our agenda here.
Well, yeah,
too.
we can do that, especially if it comes up with the city that they're going to deal with this.
Right.
Because that's the natural time to deal with it.
Or recommend formally this body that some actions be taken. But I'm not quite sure I understand all the issues yet because of
Well,
the
yeah,
great
there's a
work
lot
you've
here.
done. There's a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
But I
there's-
support what you're doing.
Yeah.
We do have this on the next item on the agenda, or coming up, right? On this meeting?
The next item is the minutes, and then,
Right.
and then
Yeah. I was going to
Sorry,
suggest
my
we put this
computer's
under
not
new
working.
business. I was going to suggest we put this under new business to be conveyed, if at not the next meeting, the one after that, whatever. I don't think we want to lose this effort that she's put.
right, exactly.
In place.
Yeah, this is good information, and
Yeah.
I'm aware of the issues, and
Right.
and there's a lot more information available now than previously.
Item 6B.
6B. It's already on the agenda today.
Yeah, if we get to it.
I think Pete heard Mayor Neely after I testified, and Mayor Neely said that he wanted to put this on, is it a work session?
Work session, for sure, yeah.
And so
Yeah.
apparently that will be coming up. And just to let you know, after the Oso Washington slide,
Yes.
I talked to the Northwest Council of Insurance in Seattle, and he gave me a list of insurance companies that may write risk insurance throughout the nation. But he also told me that if you live in a landslide area, they will write no
You
insurance.
mean
They
a-
will
a-
write
a
no
pre-
insurance on your building or on the contents.
Yeah, and that means an area that's already slid.
Or in a potential slide area.
Okay.
They're beginning to catch up to the Dogami maps.
Yeah.
They've been following these along with the United States Geological Society. And so
Yeah.
they're also beginning to map out landslide risk areas in Wyoming, Idaho, New Mexico, all kinds of states. And so, they definitely ask for your address and zero in on that. I've checked with several insurance companies here, and some of my people on Holly Lane have done the same, checked with their insurance. They can't get it.
Okay.
And I'm also writing to my state senators and my representatives to let them know about the insurance issue. I'm hoping, as Pete said, that with LCDC working on these issues, we have flood insurance and some people have earthquake insurance, but we have no landslide insurance. And I think maybe until that hurdle is dealt with, maybe it'll take that until the rest of the pieces fall into place. But at least that's what I'm doing anyway on a personal basis.
Well,
So thank you for letting
And
me
thank
come
you.
and talk to
Thank
you.
you for coming to see us.
okay. and
Okay.
Thanks, Christine.
If the city's going to be scheduling a work session, then that would make it more important for us to proceed on this in the next meeting or two.
Yes.
Okay.
One suggestion, this sounds like such a great idea for like a field trip, maybe with city commission or, members of this committee, because I think there's a knowledge you get from being out in the field and actually seeing and comparing stuff that's a different way than just seeing it on a map or a
Yeah, I
presentation.
mean, you can look at developments that have been improved in the recent, there's only a few of them, but
Yeah,
it's
this
be useful.
first page, the center one is the Kenema area, and there's a lot of houses built on that landslide. And there's picture-perfect textbook examples of dropped, still level, more or less, block that has all the things that the geologists say are supposed to be there in an area that has already moved. And it's all within this landslide area, naturally enough. And there's houses built there, of course, on this edge where you have the best view.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
But
so-
anyway, we can talk about that more later and
Okay.
maybe get it on the next agenda.
Yeah, we may be able to shorten our item 6B, having discussed this. Yeah.
Okay. We want to go ahead and adopt the minutes. Does anyone have any comments on the March 12th minutes?
As a secretary, I read through them, they looked okay to me, so I'm not recommending anything from me, but I don't know if
Yeah.
any of you have.
Well, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
if anybody saw anything,
Move we adopt the minutes as produced.
okay.
Thank you, Ginger Toe, for reviewing them too.
Yep.
And Pete.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, motion by Jerry Herman and second by Bob Roth to approve the minutes as read. So I take call a vote, or you just want to do it by consensus?
I think we can do it by consensus. If there's no further questions on this subject, I'm going to consider the minutes accepted.
Great.
Okay. I'd like to, the Cove Tree Management recommendation is actually old business, and I'd like to move it up to the beginning of old business.
New business?
Okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
What number are we on?
What was 6A will now be 5A, and 5A will be 5B,
Okay.
if that's okay with everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. The recommendation that we made several months ago was brought up to the Urban Renewal Commission, and the only one of us that was there was Douglas DeHart. So I'd like to have him give us a little rundown on what he heard and saw at that meeting.
Sure, be glad to do that. I hope you're all aware that a video of that discussion is available too. So if you want more information or want to be sure you're understanding what someone said word for word, you should go there and actually listen to it. But a little bit of background, as you recall, our recommendation of several months ago, and at least my understanding that we were hoping or expecting feedback from the city staff on our recommendation. And that sort of met up with what I thought was a different subject. If you remember at our last meeting, Pete mentioned that the planning process for Clackamet Cove was being restarted, and he mentioned that there was likely to be a Clackamet Cove discussion at the May meeting of the Urban Renewal Commission, and I agreed that I would sit in for the committee and listen and report back. And a couple of days before the meeting, I looked up the agenda and I didn't see a Clackamet Cove item. I asked Pete at that point if there would be a discussion, and Pete actually passed my question on to Tony Conkle, and Tony responded that there would be a Clackamet Cove discussion under the city manager's report. So I attended the meeting to hear that, and when I arrived, Tony Conkle asked me if I wanted to make a statement for the committee, and I told him I was just there as an observer, and honestly at that point I didn't even know what the specific subject of the discussion would be. But then, okay, we go through the rest of the meeting, and the last item is the city manager's report, and the second item on that turned out to be a discussion of our recommendation. And David asked Tony to lead that discussion, and I think, I don't know whether Urban Renewal Commission members had even had a chance to look at our recommendations in advance, but I have to say, Tony described them in a minute or two fairly accurately and fairly carefully, I thought. I mean, he identified that there was concern about saving the trees that had been designated in the plan for the site, and that we had offered up some recommendations for how that could be done. And then he said that he had discussed those recommendations with Scott Archer and with John Erickson, both of whom were there, and then he asked them for their reactions. And Scott replied that the Parks and Recreation maintenance staff were heavily overburdened with their assignments, and they really did not have the time or the resources to be involved in activities such as this. He asked John, and John's response was, well, since this is about to become a construction site, it's probably not appropriate to involve volunteers in any activities in any case. And then Tony asked if there were any comments from the commission members. The only person that made a comment of substance was Doug Neely, and he questioned the value of preserving large cottonwoods, commenting that they're dangerous when they fail, and questioned the use of metal mesh as a way of protecting trees from beaver damage, and suggested that might be hazardous as well. No other members of the commission offered any substantive comments. Tony then asked if he should read from this then that there was no support for following through with our recommendations. The chair agreed that that was evidently true, and that was the end of the discussion.
Oh, did they vote on it or not?
There was no vote per se, no.
Oh, okay.
Who was the
Well,
chair of the
wasn't
urban renewal board? Do you remember? It's not the mayor.
No, it's a private citizen, but I can't. Oh no, I'm wrong, aren't I? The chair is is a member of the city commission, isn't
I
she?
believe so.
Yes,
Yeah.
the newly appointed.
Carol Pauley?
Is that correct? I mean,
I'm
I
not
don't
sure.
know her,
I
but
don't know.
it's
Lady Mom is the only
isn't
other-
she the individual that owns the pub up the hill?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Commissioner
yes.
Pauley.
Yes, that's right. That was who was sitting as the chair. The vice chair is a private citizen, I guess.
Right. So the city commission serves, and the commission itself is about 5 or 7.
I think there's 5 city commissioners and 2 private citizens
yeah,
out there. I
okay.
think that's
All right.
right, Pete.
Yeah.
I don't know that much
no,
about it, but I
that
believe
sounds
that's correct.
Yeah. And Eric Underwood is the economic development manager, staff liaison to the Urban Renewal Commission,
Mm-hmm.
and is also responsible for working with the Cove property
Yes.
developers on the development agreement. Okay.
And at least my impression, Pete, and check me here, it was just what I gathered from the discussion. You know, some of these things I'm not privy to the approach the city's taking on them, but the staff view seemed to be that Clackamat Cove, because it's a designated development site, that the Urban Renewal Commission is essentially responsible for policy decisions in that area, or that seemed to be the
Yeah.
staff was deferring to them on policy issues there.
As the designated landowner is the Urban Renewal Authority, signatory to the land use application, and then the developer through the development agreement is bound by that collaborative agreement, and any land use approvals necessary to complete the development, which we need to reevaluate. Yeah.
There's some problems coming up with that development. The sewerage agency has offered to let them use a piece of land for 30 years because they may want to develop more sewer plant in the future, and that's their timeline. And their banker is saying, you have to have a 99-year lease on this or we're not giving you any money. So that's a problem, a big problem.
Yes, I reported that to you today from Margie Hughes, who talked with me about that. I guess I have a couple of questions here. One is the normal procedure for recommendation for us when we haven't heard back from staff. We never heard anything back from staff in 4.5 months now. Is it to then take it to another body and then hear back from them? I'm trying to figure out what happened here.
Well, I sent it to my direct supervisor, Tony Conkle, and explained that this was intended to go up to the city manager and to all applicable department heads. And I think the response was, yeah, okay, we will discuss it at the department head meeting, which is usually held on a Wednesday, or actually a Tuesday, sorry, before the city commission meeting. And then also a recommendation that in order to advocate more strongly for a recommendation, it would be useful to have a member of the NRC actually come and speak to the commission that we were trying to communicate with directly.
Well, Pete, doesn't that
Yeah.
leave out a step, though? I mean,
As far as the
my
staff?
impression was certainly that Tony, in good faith, discussed
Did that.
this with other department heads.
Yes, he did.
But it seems like between there and a final recommendation for policy action, I mean, we'd repeatedly asked for any feedback or requests for clarification. It seems like that's the piece that didn't happen. to
Yeah,
me.
I mean, if I could speak for Scott Archer, which I really can't, but you have the Parks Department who's maintaining the area on either side of the trail where the trail goes through because they do that. You have the landowner, which is the Urban Renewal Authority, and then you have a lot of department staff working in more than one capacity as steward, caretakers of the property. So there's a sort of I guess a tacit understanding that some department that is responsible for the maintenance there, but primarily for liability associated with use of the site as a recreation site. And then whoever is supposed to be maintaining the property from a prospective development site is less clear. And that's something where, Randy and Ed, the developers of the Cove, have been very active in trying to communicate and reach out to conservation groups over the years to assure you that future development would be sensitive to the natural resources in the area. From a land use perspective, the concept plan for the Cove is still valid. I think it's a 20-year concept plan, but each subsequent phase only has a 2-year approval, and they either have to pull a building permit within that time or it expires. They can get a year extension. Right now, all phases have expired. So we need the applicant to come back around, submit the site plans for the current development. I'm not sure I'm answering your question there.
No, you're not exactly, though. That's an interesting one to me, and that's what I thought was going to be discussed last week, and of
okay.
course it wasn't, for that matter.
Right.
But I'm back at the process that we have working with the city's staff and making recommendations. I mean, step one, is either somebody asks us or we become aware of something that we think falls within the purview of our responsibilities. Step two is we make some kind of recommendations. Step three, I would hope, is we get some kind of feedback or ask for request for clarification, and that's what didn't happen here. We immediately went to the next step where the staff decided they didn't wish to use our recommendation and told somebody else it wasn't useful, but they forgot to tell us.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly. And there's several
And
clarifications.
it's not coming all the way back to you. It frustrates me as well.
There's several
so-
things that are onerous and wrong with what he just reported to us in terms of how I see things. It is not a construction zone. Otherwise, you'd have that path closed to public access. Should the development move forward in September, it will become a construction zone, and then you'd keep people out of there just like you did with the bridge issue. But we spent
This is an
several
interim,
weeks
yeah.
fooling around with that recommendation and refining it. And it's had 4 months to sit out there for response. And then for this kind of thing to happen, I don't quite understand this, I'm a member of this body. I can also not be a member of this body and go back and correct the record with each one of those commissioners, which is what I feel like doing, to be honest with you. Because I don't think they heard the information adequately. They may have heard it from a perspective, but it wasn't why we did it. It wasn't explained. So if this is the way that we're going to do business, and I have something else I want to discuss, and it has to do with what the manager was telling me, David, just before this, 1 week before this, and I asked him about this recommendation, and he didn't indicate anything about this coming up, and yet it was 1 week later that it came up. I explained to him how hard we worked on this recommendation, and we were hoping to hear something. But he had other things to say, and so I don't know how this body feels, but I feel I have a lot better things to do with my time. And I want to correct the record, whether I'm a member of this group or not, and I can do it very easily by not being a member of this group, publicly, okay? And I also feel like what I heard from the manager, and I'll say it right now, was that this organization, we are not seen in a positive light by the commission. I've talked to commission members since that meeting with David, and some are telling me that, well, they actually think quite highly of us, and some I have not gotten to yet. But what I was hearing was if this body wanted to be effective, what you might want to do is get busy doing projects. And my question was, what kind of projects? Well, planting and enhancement. I've done this all my life, okay? I led the cleanup efforts here for 21 years. I was involved with it. I now lead Gladstones for other reasons, okay? So I think this body has a responsibility to find out, are we perceived as valuable or not? Is this going to be a modus operandi? Because 8 months ago we went through the same thing regarding the tree ordinance related to Waterboard Park. And then I also hear things from staff, and I'm not going to say who, that they take directions from certain people, and if directed to do something, they will, and if not, they won't. I heard that today. So where I'm at is I want to know if this committee has any value. We spent a bunch of time on refining our goals and objectives, and I think we have a much better product. I reported that to David, too, and he kept coming back with, well, I think you'd be perceived better if you were out doing projects.
Could I suggest something else?
Yes.
I mean, we've got a few things that we need to do in terms of the bylaws and on also getting face time with the commission in terms of telling them what we've been doing for the last 2 years. And we need to make that commitment to get face time with the commission so that we can talk about exactly this. And so before before we go there, Jerry, I would like to try other avenues, and I think we need to do that in order to make sure that the city commission's goals and objectives are well aligned with the Natural Resources Committee's goals and objectives, which is what Mayor Neely said a couple months ago. And so we need to pay attention to that as well.
Pete, I'm a little bit concerned when native species like cottonwoods are bad trees, or it kind of makes me nervous about Clackamat Park, all those bad trees there that might come down or something. I mean, are we really in a position where we're going to judge native species as a good native species we want to preserve and protect, and this is one we want to, it's too much trouble to keep up or something?
Everything is, when it comes to trees, it's always site specific. So, I can't answer that on a general basis,
Well, there is one answer, isn't there? I mean,
Yeah.
some large cottonwoods were designated to be maintained at the Clackamat Cove site.
Yes, certainly. But when was that? And how long ago did those plans get reviewed and approved by the Urban Renewal Authority?
They were,
Yeah.
gosh, it's probably been around 2 years.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the developer
I haven't-
was
Yeah.
basically the one that developed the plans and presented them to the city. And
Okay.
the city said, okay, go
Yeah.
ahead with it.
Yeah.
And I assume, as far as I've been able to gather from the developers, they're planning on continuing with that basic plan.
I am here to try to facilitate that communication and
Yeah.
get it coming back two
Well,
ways.
I'm not done yet. Before I leave tonight, okay?
Yeah.
I'm going to make this last statement. I asked David, if you have these strong feelings about this committee, why don't you come and talk this committee? Because I don't feel like I should be the one conveying your ideas. And he said, well, why don't you at least put it out there, which is what I've done. And I feel like, again, if this body is not willing to meet with the manager and discuss what his concerns are, I don't know where we're going, because there's people below the manager that we interface with besides you, in my opinion, that are causing a stumbling block here. So, and that's where I'm at, and I'm leaving this meeting, and I'm not sure whether I'm going to continue. But at this point, I'm leaving this meeting and let you guys decide what you want to do, because I feel very strongly that we spent a lot of time and effort, and I don't think it's going anywhere. We have solved a lot of problems with our bylaws. Now it's down to, are they going to listen to us, give us feedback, even if it's not constructive feedback, and it's in opposition, it'd be nice to hear something, then hear about it last fact.
Before you leave,
Yes.
don't go yet.
Don't go there.
I don't usually care about process, but when this group makes a recommendation and says, we would like this recommendation to go to the Urban Renewal Commission, is there such a thing as a piece of paper that says recommendation, Natural Resource Committee, that would automatically go to the place we're recommending it to go?
Yeah, the question is automatic, right?
Well,
no,
why-
there
I
is a
mean-
piece of paper, and then I think the process of getting there,
Well, why is it so difficult?
because the city manager sets the agenda for the city commission.
So did you ask David Frazier why our recommendation?
No, I told him that 4 months ago we made a recommendation that we're still waiting to hear back on, and now you're asking me to convey an idea of us being a service committee doing planning projects, and I don't understand how these two quite fit. I mean, that was my question. So,
and it's
feedback. It's an opposition. It'd be nice to hear something and hear about it last.
I'm delayed.
okay. So I think coming out of this body, I think there's a process. There's a bottleneck when it leaves my desk, and I think it needs to be resolved.
And in fairness, we understand
Yeah.
that's
Okay.
beyond your
How about
personal
it- How about
control.
if we do this?
Yeah.
How about if we sit down as a committee and request a meeting with the city manager,
yes.
Yeah.
and that we are going to discontinue doing any further business until that meeting occurs?
Yes.
I could sign on to that myself. I'd add a caveat to it. I mean, I think
please.
our only piece of business, I personally think, should be to iron out a revised set of
Yeah.
bylaws and procedures and take those to the city manager
Yes.
and find out if they're acceptable to him
Okay.
or if he's got different ideas and use that as the basis of the discussion.
I
All
think
right.
that's a great idea.
Yeah,
And
very
I would add to that, Jerry, I don't want you to go. I think we're on the verge of starting something that's big, and I think that all parties speak the truth. And yeah, I would love to do more projects too. So when that came up, I didn't take that as a negative. I thought, oh, great, well, if we can do some projects, that would be awesome.
Yeah,
So-
I was very excited about doing
Yeah.
projects too.
Yeah, so I think if we do this, and then we have a basis for the work plan, we're starting to develop a work plan, we talk to the city, we align it, we take our goals and show them where they match up with the city's goals, then I think we have some common things to talk about, and it'll make that conversation go really easily.
But the point that Shaw made, and Pete, you made that form up for us, and we filled out that form in process form for you to carry through. The problem is it got stalled at least one location, which I think I know where that was, and then it never got any farther. We can't have that anymore. We can't spend our time and effort on something that's important. This is not about beavers eating trees. This is about habitat issues and the effects on existing standing stuff that was supposed to be retained. I mean, my point in this whole thing is I have better things. I can go out and mobilize a whole bunch of people like Christine because I know who they are. She's very effective, and I know who those people are because I used to work with them. And bring back an army, if need be, to call attention to the issues of the cove. If the trees that were going to be protected in the cove concept plan are not going to be protected anymore, and somebody has an idea that everything's going to be mowed down around the cove as a new concept, then I guarantee you there's going to be major opposition. Because we all worked hard, myself, Brian, and other people, to make sure that that would not happen, and a process would be developed for the developer and the city to steward the area. Because it was going to be logged. 800 trees were going to be taken down, and that did not happen.
Right.
So, I can either be a part of a group here, and I asked David that. I said, David, what would you rather have us do? He said, you know, if you met once a quarter, wouldn't that be enough to be able to take care of business? I could still provide the staff to do that. I said, oh, once a quarter. And then you could work on projects. And I thought, oh, well, that's a much different role than an advisory body.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying that the two couldn't be melded. I agree with Ginger. They should be. I want to go out there and wrap those trees. Okay? Whether it's a construction zone or not, I know how to do it, and we could do it safely. I lead groups all the time in cleanup and enhancement activities, and I know we could do that kind of thing. But if there's going to be obstacles put in the way, one by one, systematically and strategically, that's wrong, and that must end. So yes, I'd like to see us sit down with the manager and find out, what do you really want from this group? And let him know what we've been doing to try to refine our 14 points of business down to 5.
Hey, Pete, just simply a flow chart saying something goes from A to B, B to C, feedback loops, but something everybody buys into, so there's not, you know, something like, so there's accountability. So if something goes from here, say to you, and you forward it, we understand why or when it isn't. We know how we can check on that. Why isn't it going
Would you
above
like Tony
that?
to come to the next meeting?
Well, it's
not
more.
going to work from the bottom up.
No,
Having
no.
flow charts and coming up with all this stuff is not going to work.
No,
But-
but what I'm trying to talk about is mutual accountability. We're working on work plans, we're working bylaws, we're doing this stuff, but it seems like once it gets out of that, anything goes. That's
Right.
the problem.
And that has to come from the top down. It's not going to happen if we make more charts and we come up with more decisions about how.
No, I'm not talking about our charge. I'm talking about a complete flow. I mean, I'm talking about from here.
No,
to
I
like
think Shell makes a good point. I think you want to get management staff in the room with you.
Pete has done his best to flow things through process. I think what he's telling us is
And-
he flows things through process, and then process breaks down where he has no further control per se.
Exactly. Or direction.
Or direction.
To proceed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's done
I
a
mean, I
marvelous.
would be, you know, I would have been happy to attend the URC meeting, except that there was a city commission thing I had to get ready later that night.
I think the
Yeah.
issue is it wasn't on the, it wasn't in a packet.
It wasn't
One
part
little
of an
piece of
agenda
paper that we
packet.
had wasn't even in a packet, I don't think. It
So
wasn't
the actual
anywhere.
recommendation wasn't.
Someone could have come from the committee and said, refer to this page on your packet, this is our recommendation.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I thought we
Yeah,
were going to
putting it
start
out there.
doing.
Like,
And
yeah, I think if we
Yeah,
do
okay.
that, the bylaws, the work plan aligned to the city's goals, and then we show where we are on that agenda, then it would be real difficult for someone not to include that when they're addressing those issues.
so
That
let's,
was my original hope, was that that would have been an agenda item with the attachments to it, but I then learned that it was just part of the city manager report.
okay.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on the proposal that we do projects. And the problem with that is it ignores what our bylaws say we're supposed to be here as an advisory body that has some input on what's going on in the city. And it would be fine to add to that somehow, maybe with some outside help, carrying out projects, because there's plenty of projects that need to be done. We have volunteers working on their own in the city parks because the city doesn't want to deal with volunteers. And you know, I've talked with them and taken down the numbers, and they're out there still working by themselves. And you know, another neighborhood group actually got financing, you know, a grant to work on their neighborhood parks, and with no interplay from the city. And these folks need direction because, you don't, just because you're enthusiastic doesn't mean you know exactly what needs to be done or the most efficient way to work. And Oregon City is losing out in comparison to other cities because they're not wanting to take on volunteer effort in that sense. And if we could provide that, great, but we've got to have cooperation from the city to do it.
So how close are we to approving these bylaws?
Pretty close, I think. We got a
Close.
few minor edits to make.
We-
Can we make those now, approve the
Yes.
bylaws tonight?
Yeah,
and
you know,
can-
I'd like to just clarify one thing about, I saw
Okay.
the part about standards for
Wanna move
attendance
on?
missing in the bylaws. It's not in there.
What?
Moving on to a new item.
Standards for attendance.
Standards for attendance is not in the
Oh,
bylaws.
it's, we've tried to send it electronically, but we've had some difficulty, but I've got it here, what I've
Okay,
sent.
well,
So we're moving on to the next item, is that it?
sure.
Oh, okay.
I want to stop for a second. We had the proposal to meet with the city manager. I
Yes.
think we need to
Yes.
hold a vote. And I know we've got, you made the proposal,
Yes.
and you said you'd second that, so we've got that.
I've got kind of a follow-up question, I guess, regarding this meeting. Is
Okay.
this part of like a regular monthly meeting? Is this a special meeting? I'm just
Special
trying-
meeting,
Special meeting.
yeah, special meeting. You know, that's something we could discuss at the meeting, you know, but that's,
Call for the question.
okay, so I'm going to call for the question, and I don't see, does anyone have anything further to say? Because I think we have unanimous
Could we take
support
a-
for this.
Could we take a vote? I'd
We'll
like
take
to
a
say a vote
Okay,
on this.
all right, let's take a vote. Ginger, why don't you start?
Yes.
Yes.
Doug DeHart, yes.
Brian Boyce, yes?
Yes.
Jerry Herman, yes.
Richard?
Richard,
Sure.
wake up.
Richard?
I was hearing all kinds of static.
Well, I might have lost him.
10-minute delay.
Oh, that's all.
Proposal to meet with the city manager, I think we
That's
need
a
to
very long delay.
hold a vote.
That is a delay.
And I know we've got, you made the proposal, and you said you'd second that, so we've got that. I've got kind of a follow-up question, I guess.
Richard, can you hear us?
Part of like a regular monthly meeting, just a special meeting, I'm just special meeting. Yeah, special meeting.
I didn't act like he heard us, but he has to be hearing something.
You know, but, part of the question.
Really
Okay,
delayed.
so I'm gonna call.
I have a question.
Time delay there.
I have a question. Pete, can you hear me?
We
Yes,
can hear you, yes.
Pete?
Yeah, yes?
We took a vote. We took a vote.
delay.
Is he voting yes or no?
Hey, Pete?
he had a question.
Sorry, we got a time delay on one of our microphones.
Oh,
Voice, yes?
So we've called the question and taken a vote on what, to meet with the city manager.
yeah, I've got a question though. I have a question to ask.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
Hear us talking. I'm not sure.
Is somebody talking on the other end there?
No.
No, it's your streaming video. There's a time delay.
Turn that off. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's better.
Okay. Now, you're taking a vote to meet with the city manager, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. I really believe you need to have the bylaws in place and you need to have your work plan in hand before you meet with the city manager.
Good advice.
What are you going to talk to him about?
I think we all agree with that.
Expectations.
We all agree with you on that.
Expectations.
Yeah. So, is the work plan finished?
No.
No.
We haven't adopted the bylaws.
You're part of the work group, Richard, on the work group.
Well, I provided my comments.
He did?
Yeah. And,
Yeah, we're close. It's the next item up on the agenda, I think.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Are the draft bylaws, do you have them in front of you? I don't have them here, and they weren't attached, as I mentioned to you
Yeah.
in the email.
We're gonna pull them up on the screen here and edit them in real time.
Okay.
right now,
I'm getting a drink of water. I'll be back.
okay?
All right.
And I don't know that you'll be able to see them, but we'll read what the edits are so that you can understand that.
Be here long.
Well, I think I'll be able to see them, okay.
Okay.
But just, I guess, one question or one comment. As Brian said, we are an advisory committee. That means we do what the city asks us to do, and we also develop other things that we want to do in our work plan. And they should be very specific.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So we have a template which we did attach to the agenda, which Bob
Yeah,
put together for our work plan template. And then
I have that.
you have that, but you don't have the most recent version of the bylaw amendments, which we're about to pull
No.
up. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So while you're talking to Richard, he's being asked to vote.
Yeah. So should we get a vote from him?
Might as well.
Yeah.
So
I heard you say
Richard,
okay.
what's your vote on the meeting with the city manager?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Hey.
All right.
Thanks.
All right. Good deal.
Okay, so
So, let's start at the beginning of the document here. I've got it on the screen. I can make amendments right here.
Bylaws? Okay.
Yes.
okay, and we should,
Why?
if we
So
flip
you-
our switch, should we be able to see that?
You should be able to see that.
There we go.
It should be the same as a hard copy, right?
There we go.
No, it's not, because I printed out the hard copy right before I left the office, and Ginger was able to make some last-minute amendments that we needed to make. But so let's,
Just flip that switch.
why don't you kick it off, Ginger?
All right. Starting from the beginning, the points of last consideration, according to our review and emails, start with the responsibilities section, Article 4, first page, and the comment from the staff that recommend review and comment on timely updates, remove the word initiate. Updates may occur with city commission's direction, giving appropriate staff resources and funding.
Okay.
What, we're supposed to take
So-
out initiate?
Take out the word initiate, is what the staff has recommended.
I want to make sure that what we discussed in
Uh-huh.
April is actually what because I did not go back and changed it right after the
Right.
meeting, so. yeah.
I felt it was important to initiate updates,
Yep.
Mhm.
You're
so
correct.
I don't want to take it out.
So,
Okay.
okay, so we'll leave it as it's written then, that first, okay. And then the third item, review and recommend land use applications, city activities that have potential to impact natural resources. Staff recommends that this read instead receive notice of and comment on, not review and recommend.
Okay?
I think actually that change might be okay,
Yes.
Yep.
all right?
So shall I make that?
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to type it in now. I'm going to attempt to.
Go, Pete, go.
So it would read, receive notice of and comment on land use applications. Which what we'll technically be doing here is reviewing and recommending, but,
Yeah,
you know.
it's better language.
Yeah, it works.
Hey, Pete, I'm looking at the changes we're making here,
Yeah.
and the work plan was based on the older set of the bylaws.
I was gonna bring that up when we
And
got to that point.
everything's going to be out of sync.
Yeah, and that's okay, we can revise it the same way we're
Okay.
doing this right now, we can talk about that when we get to that
Okay.
work plan.
Land with an L.
Land. Okay, thank you.
Second page, Article 6, organizational procedures. We thought that, I think it was either Jerry or Richard had said which version of Robert's Rules of Order And we decided on, based on Pete's feedback, that the city's bylaws say the latest revised edition.
Yes.
So we just added that language, so
Very
that's
good.
taken care of.
Very good.
And then the second item, what it means to be present is listed in item number 2, either in person or via telephone or internet. And then there's a comment down, item, staff has concerns about this change. Use of phone or internet connection such as Skype should be a backup option. It's technically feasible, but administratively burdensome for planning and media technical staff. All members should make every effort to be physically present at the meetings. We agree, but I think we still leave that in. Yeah. But we agree with them that yes.
Okay.
But we want more citizens involved, and if this makes it easier for people who would not be able to attend, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
And then on the next page, all the changes, we agreed to the changes that are already there. There are no additional staff recommendations. So then we go down to, let's see, where is, okay, Article 6. Article 6, organizational procedures. Where would that article, where does this go?
Yeah.
Might be under code of conduct. Article 8.
I wasn't sure if that.
Yes, Article 8, number
Article
6.
8? Okay.
That's where the missing language is about, and I will read it to you. This is, that was
This
in.
would be number 6?
This
or-
would be, yeah, number 6.
Okay.
And then we'll deal with the comments that are below.
Yeah,
Okay, this was
Go
in our
ahead.
original work, but it got left off last time. So I'll read it to you and then see what everyone thinks. And it includes the revision that was recommended by, when we had the, do people feel, what's the policies about absences and things, and we did some dialogue. So I've included the changes that you recommended from that into this language. And so it reads this way now. An NRC member in good standing shall attend all meetings either in person or via telephone or internet. If unable to attend, the member shall notify the chair and the city staff liaison. If a member fails to notify the chair or city staff liaison prior to missing a meeting, or if a member misses 2 consecutive meetings or 3 meetings in a calendar year, the chair will contact the committee member. The remainder of the committee will then consider a recommendation concerning continued membership.
I'm going to borrow your phone and type that in from
Okay.
here.
Nice job. Nice job, Ginger.
Peter, a question for you at this point. I presume the city has some sort of code of ethical conduct already developed, yes? I mean, does a reference to that belong here?
That's a great question.
yeah.
Yeah, their city employees are bound by a code of ethics, and there is, I don't know how, I should check to see if that extends to public officials, which you are.
There's state specifications for public officials. It's not just a local thing.
And I think most of that
Well-
language came from the Park and Rec Code of
Yes.
Conduct. And there
Correct.
was another committee that we looked at as well.
Yeah, each city's got to write rules implementing whatever higher up
Ginger,
requirements there are.
Oops.
I timed out.
I'm not going to tell you my secret code.
Sorry. 1 second, bear with me and I'll type this in. You just read it after either. And all meetings either in
Person.
person
Or via
or
Telephone.
via telephone
or internet,
or internet,
period.
period.
If unable to attend, the member shall notify the chair
Mm-hmm.
and the city staff liaison. Period. If a member fails to notify the chair or city staff liaison prior to missing a meeting
Prior to missing a meeting
or
or
if a member misses 2 consecutive meetings or 3 meetings in a calendar year, comma, the chair will contact the committee member. Period. The remainder,
what happened? Hang on. Period. Okay.
the remainder of the committee
Put that little switch
Yeah, to the left.
will then
to the left
consider
and hold it a second. It'll do whatever it does.
a recommendation concerning continued membership. Period.
That's it.
Yay.
Yay. Save.
Yes.
Okay.
Straightforward.
Very good. Thank you.
Is this a copy?
Okay, and then the last comment there then is that there are some tree subcommittee tasks on Appendix A that remain to be done, such as numbers 1 and 6.
Numbers 1 and 6.
One, which is study, investigate, develop, and submit a written tree plan for the care, preservation, pruning, planting, replanting, removal, or disposition of trees in parks and in public areas. That's in the deleted, in the right, Appendix A, in the right-hand column. So number 1, and then number 6 is develop an Oregon City tree ordinance that shall apply to trees on both public and private property.
Aren't those work plan items the way we're approaching the work plan?
Yeah, they could be. Would we, so the question is, do we want to remove them from our bylaws and just leave them in the work plan? Or do we want to return them to our bylaws?
No, work plan. They
Work plan?
sound like
Okay,
work plan.
work plan.
Yes.
Okay.
Work plan.
All right.
Yeah.
That is the breadth of the changes that we were going to discuss tonight.
One question, and I should have brought it up sooner. Back, oh gosh, I don't know where it is now. When we first talked about what constituted attendance at a meeting.
Yes, it's in 2 places.
And we were looking at the staff comments on that one. The staff comments included the acknowledgement that there's some, technical difficulties in off-site participation, and then there was wording there, something about members making a good faith effort or a reasonable effort to be present in person. That may well be good wording. I mean, I would hope that we would do that when possible.
This is what we came up with, and that's the comment. This is the language, yeah.
Should we add that last sentence, all members should make every
Maybe
effort to be
that
physically
sentence or
present?
something like it,
Yeah.
Should we add that to
Yeah.
Article 4,
Yes,
number
I think
2?
that's a good idea.
Are you there?
Yeah, we're here, Richard. Hello?
I have a question,
Oh, Article 6,
whenever
I'm
you
sorry.
get time.
Article
Doesn't it go
6,
here?
number 2.
So what we're
Yeah,
talking
right there.
about, Richard, is
Yeah.
about adding a sentence
Adding this
to
last
Article
sentence
6,
here.
number
Right.
2.
Goes right
Yeah.
there.
And the sentence would read, all members shall make a good faith effort to be physically present in a meeting?
Oh, no, I heard what it was.
Okay.
I have a question on another article, once you get finished with that one.
Okay,
Okay.
well, let me type this in. All,
This is good.
do I have that correct?
Uh-huh.
Shall,
Remember
Should.
that.
should. Continue?
Make every effort to be physically present at the meetings.
Okay, Richard, what's your question?
It's back on Article 4, responsibilities, number 2, review and initiate. I don't like the word initiate, frankly, because it sounds like we can initiate reviews. And I think I like what the comment to the right is. Updates may occur with commission direction given appropriate staff resources and funding. I think we would recommend updates. I don't think we would initiate them unless we were directed to do so by the city commission.
Yeah, we did talk about that at the last meeting in April as well. I remember now.
Pete, I think I had at least some strong feelings about that, and I guess the question is whether or not we're simply a passive committee waiting for stuff to come to us. I mean, if we haven't had anybody come in to ask us our ideas about climate change, and I hope that we'd have some commitment, some interest, or we could take steps that we're not a passive organization. I think initiate's a good thing because we have knowledge, we've got experience. A lot of us, live here in the city. So, what's wrong with taking initiative under the proper circumstances? I just don't think passive and playing defense all the time just isn't. You don't win games just by playing defense.
I wonder if Richard is making a little different point. And I agree with your point, Bob, but I mean, in a different sense, we are an advisory group. In the end, the city themselves must decide to initiate a code revision or something of this sort. But what we're talking about here is, number one, reviewing things they bring to us, and number two, deciding on our own that something needs to be revised. Maybe we just need to wordsmith this a bit, so we're not sounding like we're stepping outside of our role in recommending
Yeah.
that. Huh?
How about if we say review updates to the city's comprehensive plan, blah, 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 and add another sentence that says, and initiate recommendations to the same if...
Yeah, there may be...
So we're reviewing the updates, but we're also initiating
I
recommendations
like
for
that.
further updates.
Or
Yes,
recommending
as
the city
appropriate.
initiate.
Yeah.
Yeah, if there's something left
I'm not
out, we
sure
have
how
to
you say that.
initiate something new. And
Well, yeah, it's like...
yeah, exactly.
Or things get lost in the
Let me
shuffle.
try to get that.
How about create recommendations,
Well, I think
something like that?
the thing about initiate recommend. I think what I like is by initiate, it means that it doesn't leave us in a passive role.
Right.
I mean, what if somebody just forgets something off the agenda, and we're waiting for them to ask, well, what do you guys think about that? And, well, we don't know because nobody ever asked us.
Well, how about if we do this? Initiate recommendations and review updates to the city commission's comprehensive plan. That
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That works.
that's both ideas.
yeah.
Yeah, very good.
And it makes
I
it clear
think
that we're still in a recommendation role, an
Yeah.
advisory
Yeah.
role.
So we would start out the sentence saying recommend
Initiate
recommendations. Yeah, you were right.
and review updates
There you go.
to the city's comprehensive plan. It does both.
Yeah.
Review.
So that was simple.
Updates.
Go, Bob, go.
I think you can just say review and recommend updates.
Well,
You're wasting words.
No, initiate's an important word.
Yep.
Initiate has nothing to do with anything because that's what the city commission does. But we can review and recommend updates.
If
They don't
there's,
have to ask us to do the update.
Pete,
Yeah.
take the and out.
I think what we're talking
I
about
see,
is
yeah.
if there's something left out that we feel should be in there, we
Yes.
should be free to recommend an update. Take the
Right.
initiative to
But
do
when
that.
when you say initiate, it sounds like we're the city commission. We're going to initiate these changes.
It doesn't say initiate
that's not what
changes,
we're
it says
about.
initiate recommendations.
We're just initiating recommendations.
No,
Initiating recommendations is all they're saying.
If we were saying we were city council, we'd be voting. City commission, we'd be voting, not recommending.
What is the difference in saying initiate and recommend?
Well, I guess the initiate reserves at least our ability not to be passive, not waiting for something to happen. It'd be like we recommend the kid not cross the road in front of the car. Initiate means you grab the kid as he's stepping out in front of the car.
Yeah, they want it to be more action-oriented. And I don't see a problem with that.
To me, recommend is an action word. Review and recommend updates.
Yeah, well,
I'm sticking to my guns.
It means the same.
Yeah, there's two different things here. We're going to review the work that the city's done that has to do with natural resources, and if we find it comes up short, we're going to initiate a recommendation for them to potentially add. We're not putting it in
I
there.
think you're mincing words here.
Yeah.
And, review and recommend, that doesn't mean that you have to wait for the city commission to come and ask you to do something. It simply says, we're going to review it, and we're going to recommend things to the city commission.
Mr. Chair, it seems to me like we have a difference of opinion in
Well,
wording.
we-
We probably said what we're going to say.
Yeah, I think that
You can vote on it.
we can vote on this particular change
We're talking about voting on this particular change, Richard.
since there is a
Really?
discussion.
Okay.
Or we can vote on the whole thing if we're ready.
So,
If we're ready.
But I think we have a subset that
Okay.
needs to be decided.
Okay.
So
Those who would like to initiate.
if we're going to,
The language that is up there.
what we need to do is have a motion that we accept this language,
Article
And a
4, number 2.
and then we'll do a voice vote.
I move.
Okay, the
You've
motion is
moved?
to accept the language for number 2 that would be initiate recommendations and updates to the city's comprehensive plan.
And
code-
review updates.
Review updates.
And review updates to the city's comprehensive plan, codes, and policy as they relate to statewide planning goals that are integral to our mission. So I'll call the
Okay.
vote.
I
Okay, we're-
second.
The second
I have a
from-
question.
Okay.
What does initiate mean?
It means basically to make recommendations, is all it
To
means.
initiate means to begin
To
something.
create.
Yeah, but we get to create one
It means to
If-
create something.
if the code that is handed to us by the city falls short in some way. We will initiate a recommendation to the city council or whatever review body the city has to add language that we think is necessary.
Well, that's what we already do. That's what we did last time.
Then he agrees with us.
Good, so
Yeah,
We just put
Then
it in
it's in our
writing.
bylaws.
we're just putting it in
Yeah,
writing.
okay, great.
Okay, well, I'll call the vote.
All right, Ginger, do you want to start voting?
Aye.
Shaw, aye.
Doug DeHart, aye.
Brian Boyce, aye.
Bob Roth, aye.
Jerry Herman, aye.
And ask Richard.
Richard,
Richard, aye.
thank you.
All right.
Aye for initiate.
Very good.
All right. Is there anything more that we need to deal with in this?
No.
Good work.
job.
Sean
Yeah.
and Ginger and.
Yeah.
You, Doug.
And
I think we
Jay?
need to
Finding this thing.
circle back around and thank Carol Kemis for getting us on the path in the
Absolutely.
first
Exactly.
place.
You know, we'd
Yes, that's
asked,
true.
we asked.
So
We
I
said we
recommend-
would produce a letter thanking her.
Okay.
We
I
should
don't
do that.
recommend.
Huh?
Move.
I move that we
Accept the amended.
accept the amendment,
Oh.
accept the amended bylaws.
Revised.
All right.
Revised bylaws.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we accept the currently revised set of bylaws.
Okay, I'll repeat it for Richard because I don't
Okay.
know about the time delay. Richard, we have a motion and we,
I heard it.
okay, got it.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right, let's ask Richard to vote first.
Richard, you can vote first.
Aye.
Jerry?
Jerry?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Brian, aye.
Doug DeHart, aye.
Shaw, aye.
Ginger, aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Good job.
Thank you.
All right.
So next step for me will be to take this up to City Commission, I believe.
Are we going
Oh,
to
we're
do a
not gonna
work plan
do
at the
that.
same
Right, we're gonna do the
time?
work plan.
Well,
Well,
yeah,
and
let's talk about the work plan.
go right there for a second, though.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all right.
Because I think what we talked about was next step would be to discuss this and the work plan with the city manager.
Okay.
Before it went to the commission, yes?
Right, right, yes. Yes.
Yeah, so Doug's saying the next step is to discuss this with the city manager and the work plan before it goes to City Commission.
And I guess, at least personally, I wouldn't rule out that he might have some recommendations for modifications that we might want to consider.
I agree.
Agree.
And I thought, when I looked at the annual work plan, and I responded to email that I needed to see it side by side with the bylaws to get an idea of, and that's where I noticed, oh, they're not quite, maybe when we finish the bylaws, then we can go back and look at this. So I don't know.
Make sure
if-
everything.
Well, he has a
Yeah.
couple placeholder, or Bob
Well,
does.
there's a couple of, I'd be glad to lead a discussion on the work plan, but I think there's a sequence probably with the changes and stuff that
Or-
probably make more
I was-
sense.
I was wondering if maybe the subcommittee wanted to go back and look at it again
Yeah,
and bring it back?
Put them
or-
all
in the
side
next
by
week?
side to make sure everything's
Yeah.
copacetic.
I
Or-
think it really does line up.
Yeah.
It's more site-specific, like the Cove and a couple other things, but that's what's needed right now.
Yeah, well, I was started with the first responsibility category 1A, and I was
1A.
trying to find 1A in here.
Well, I think the problem, well, I tell you, I'd be glad to lead a discussion on this, but I think we just probably want to figure out what's appropriate to talk about tonight
Yeah.
and what we need
Okay.
more work on.
Does anybody have any questions on the work plan at this point in time?
I like what's been done. It's opening up, it cites, it's specific to certain tasks, which I like that. After hearing that Clackamas Cove maybe needs to be looked at in great detail again, is what I heard this meeting and last meeting, then we need to be on top of that. So,
Pete, if I could point out one thing, because we were trying to fill this out
Yeah.
with the best information we had available at the time, and like under 2A and 2C, we simply don't know when that's coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, okay.
And so, if we were going to try to put together an annual work plan,
Yeah.
we would need guidance from you on when to anticipate this stuff taking place, because what we don't want to try to do is have 8 different work plan items all kind of due at the same time, because we didn't know when different things were coming down.
Okay. Yeah, so both items 2A and 2B from a planning process are considered legislative processes which require comprehensive public involvement as well as recommendation from the Planning Commission up to the City Commission and a series of public hearings before they get adopted. 2A, comprehensive plan revisions are required whenever public facilities plans like sewer, water, transportation, and stormwater get revised. And those do happen this year for sewer and stormwater. And also for Lynn Avenue corridor plan, which is just kicked off. So that's a transportations thing. So you've got, and then you have what DLCD requires cities to do, which is periodic review. Comprehensive plan revisions every time DLCD says you need to do one, and they give you money to do that. The last time we did a periodic review revision was when you were involved initially in 2003 and 4 and went through all the goals and policies for that. We haven't received notice from DLCD to do a periodic review yet. But in the meantime, we will have those other 3 that I mentioned.
Uh-huh. And you can tell us something about the preliminary schedule and
Yeah.
what would be the likely window for our input?
Certainly.
Because that's what we need to build
Yeah.
the work plan.
Yeah, certainly. 2B, code revisions ongoing. Planning Commission, code cleanup, we did postpone till late 2014 because we had too much on our plate with Blue Heron and various other things. Planning Commission was more than happy to defer that until late 2014, but we do have that work matrix. We need to change the dates on it, and similarly, we would provide a schedule for that for you. And that is a
okay.
legislative process as well, outside of the comprehensive plan.
Yeah,
And
and
those are,
I tell you, and Pete, that's the same kind of stuff you look at the second page, like under Blue Heron and Clackamas Cove, where we just need is to know when we need to be engaged and work backwards, like if we need certain materials or a tour, that kind of stuff. Just looking at 12-month period or annual plan, when's the stuff come down?
so just to be clarifying on Blue Heron, the master plan process for that, the schedule for that is, tentative, so we can share that with you. The Cove project, I don't know what the site plan review process is, but you have the separate development agreement process with urban renewal going on separately from that right now. So I would defer to Eric Underwood on the schedule on the development agreement, but the land use process is something we certainly would include the notice on right off the bat once we get it. And I'm specifically referring to the apartment site plan because that's what's expired and what's expected to move forward first, where they're talking about a couple of hundred units of apartments. And any mitigation associated with that. Yeah. Okay? All right, so yeah, we'll fill in the blanks as well as we can, and they'll be as near as we can get them based on.
Do you know, as far as the action parts, what we really need to do, I'm willing to do it, is go back and look at the bylaws we just adopted. And part of the thing is, even when you had like one responsibility heading, we actually would clump several different things together. And so what we did at our meeting was try to break out the different things, because different parts of the same responsibility could have different timelines, different related activities, and ideally maybe different lead people involved. It's just too hard to try to put a couple different things under the same heading and have one joint timeline. It's better to kind of break it all out.
So kind of like this is an overview,
Well,
and then we'd have a second corresponding page that would kind of,
well, it'd be kind of like
More fully.
that we take, the idea would still be with the final numbering and stuff, that you would basically, depending on how the bylaws break down now, you still might have one A, B, and C, because you have maybe like 3 different things listed under one. The problem is just with the space you have, if you try to write out everything under area of responsibility in the little box, use microscopic font or something like that. It just doesn't work very well.
And
But-
then-
Yeah, this is.
so when the one corresponds to the article, I mean,
And again, this was like,
I'm a slow processor for this,
Sure.
because I like to see all the little details. So when I'm looking at the response, help me read this.
sure.
1A. What is
Now,
there a number 1A here? Or
Well,
1A
you have to remember, this is
numbering
going
system?
back to the bylaws we
Okay.
had back like at the last
All right.
meeting.
So that's not, okay.
Yeah, it's
So,
like
so you're saying 1A used
Article
to be
4
related to
here.
1A?
Well, yeah,
Article-
if it relates to this, then what number?
Well, it's like back when we had like the 5 areas of responsibility,
Right. Yeah.
the one we were using at the last
Yep,
meeting.
yep.
Yeah.
Basically, you take like one, here in the work plan, we respond
Okay.
to the first
Yeah,
area of
yeah, yeah.
responsibility. And then what happens is when you look at the bylaws for number 1, in the area of responsibility, you actually see that the thing that's different about 1 is those were specific activities, and we didn't, except for
Right,
Jerry's
right.
Isn't that
tour.
from this group? Isn't that
Yeah.
where
So
this
that's
came from?
back here?
Yeah.
Those?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's where it came from.
It does relate quite well, the way he's done it.
But
It's close.
the
Those aren't in the
placeholders are-
bylaws anymore, they're just activities.
No,
now.
but we're talking about areas
Okay.
of responsibility.
That helps me find it, okay.
Yeah.
She was just looking for a
Yeah.
reference
Oh,
point.
I see. So you're tying it back to the Article 4
Yeah, you
responsibility.
did. You
Right.
did a nice job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
4 or
But
5.
the
whatever.
reason the thing's obsolete now is we've reformatted the areas of responsibility so much that you can't look at the new areas, the new way we phrase stuff, and it doesn't correspond one-to-one with the old set of
Right.
activities. So basically, we spent a lot of time on it tonight, or basically, it makes more sense to re-include the stuff the way it's phrased now. But the thing I want to point out is that the stuff, once you get into deliverables and outcomes or evaluating stuff, this isn't really something I think just one or even two people on a committee can really fill out for everything. I think we need to really
Yeah,
think,
the
and
work, yeah.
you can't really do it in 15 minutes
Right, right.
on a.
But I sure like the concept, though. The product, the deliverables, the criteria by which you're going to evaluate, resources that are needed for like the tour or whatever. A bus is needed, some help in planning and all that. And by the way, I don't want that to just be me. I want that to be me, myself, staff, and members. Last year it was myself and staff and Brian. I'd like to have us a little more involved this year, because it went really well.
Yeah.
So.
I think what just kind of a principle of the idea too is we're all busy doing a lot of different things. We all have different backgrounds and expertise. Might be the way that on some of these there might be a lead committee member, say something like Blue Heron. Somebody's really interested in Blue Heron. They got the right background.
Yeah,
they've got
there you
the
go.
time to devote, and other people could be involved. But if we have like assignments for
Person.
specific
Right.
things, we can't all be equally involved in everything, or it's not appropriate to the same degree because we're not all the same.
And I know, yeah, we do have primary staff members for all of these things under 3. So, for example, I would add Christina Robinson Gardner as a contact on that, or Kelly Moosberger. Clackamas Cove, essentially, we don't know who, it's either planning staff review for the land use portion and then Eric Underwood for the development agreement. So these are the things that we can fill in.
I would love a few more items to tie into this, and I was thinking about our earlier conversation of how do we meet with Dave and tie our work plan to the city's goals. So under the primary staff, might have city goal. So we can write in that, the city's goal in this area is, goal 4, maybe they've got in that document, the pamphlet that they produced where they have their work plan for 2 years, we can put that, or Oregon City Goal 4A. So when someone looks at this document, they can see our priority and the city's priority are on the same line. That this is our work in that.
That's a great idea.
I think if you look at number 4, just one of the old areas of responsibility, this was just based on what was in the area of responsibility at that time.
Right.
But I think what we can do is say make 4A the original old one, but 4B could be the thing with the city manager. I think it forces you to
Yeah.
kind of think through.
Yeah, I wish I could.
I would stick an extra column in.
And just have the city goal.
And then have
for
the
alignment.
city
It's
goal.
kind of a reference to the city's goal.
Yeah.
It's a good idea.
And mayor, and then you can just go like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we can have city goals another category.
Though it is to some degree related to outcomes too. I
And
mean, in
this
more
is
general
your in our.
sense, but-
Yeah.
I don't want to mark this up, but I could save it under a different file.
So basically, I think what has to happen is we need to update this to reflect what we just approved tonight and get it out. But if everybody could look at it and look at it kind of across the board too, because I think it would be different ideas. Some people have different ideas what deliverables might be in one category versus another, or what kind of outcomes. And I think the important one's going to be resources needed. I think, Brian, you were saying that by the time we get done with this, there's going to be more here than we're probably likely to do, and we'll have to prioritize.
Yeah, prioritizing on a work plan is crucial. I mean, if you can't do that, you've really done nothing, because you got to say, we were going to get this done this year, and this will wait for next year. You've got to, because if we try to do everything we need to do, it's going to be impossible. We
Well,
don't have
but it'll
that
change
much
from
time.
year to year too. We'll have focus
yeah.
areas from year to year.
Right.
Or we
Yeah.
will probably
And that's
change
the whole
from month
point
to
is-
month.
Like the,
something that's low priority now might be higher priority next year.
right, this
because
business
it's-
of number 1, promoting community involvement. I
Yeah.
believe Bob had something in mind here for 1B. It says placeholder, but I changed it already to be wildlife effects. Protect vegetation, reduce losses, evaluation criteria, count beavers. Resources needed, shotgun, what was the other thing you suggested?
I'm not against beavers.
You're very
They
specific.
were here
Well, you
before
talked
we
about
were.
that
Did
other.
you go to
substance.
University of Oregon?
Plantscape, or relocation, right?
Oh, poor beavers.
I was just testing the methodology.
It
here, that's
works.
Pig's blood.
It's a good system.
But it's
Sterilized the
but-
beaver.
but-
Now,
but
if you want more
rather than
people
just
involved, you put
1A,
bacon down
3B,
there.
We can come
People
up
would come
with
down.
short phrases that
Yeah,
would make it easier to read.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah,
It's sort of keywords.
yeah, 2 or 3 words. Community involvement would be
Sure.
an easy way of putting it, and that would be a lot better than 1A.
Sure, it
Yeah.
just makes it easy to read,
Yeah.
easy to understand when you're looking at it.
Yeah, we can do keywords.
Great idea.
Yeah.
No, I haven't changed anything. All I did was
Right.
add a column in that.
I think this would really look good, to,
And it shows
Present
that
to
we
the
do
city
more
commission
than
or
just
whatever.
projects.
I mean,
I like that. I like having the city
Yeah.
commission goal and priority number
I
in the
do
first
too.
column.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of like having our responsibilities in the first column.
Well, I
myself.
thought you might debate that.
Well,
so,
maybe the
yeah.
second column then will.
We can flip those.
I kind of like this, the city commission goals and priorities kind of over here by outcomes somewhere, because I think they're sort of related.
And maybe put city goals after our priorities, yes.
I don't care.
well,
Have to be sorted
city
out.
goal met, number 1 or number 5.
Well, yeah, I don't disagree that they are. It's just that because we've ordered these things in the order of our responsibilities, the city goals will be kind of
Match up.
hit or miss. I mean, they will be
Yeah.
what they are.
Yeah, yeah, because they're developed on a 2-year cycle, and then budgeted accordingly.
And we aren't approaching those comprehensively. We'll only touch a few of them, probably.
Right. Yeah.
We'll have to go by 8.5 by
Still,
14.
it's a useful.
Oh, I think it should be
Yeah.
there. I think it should be there. I just don't think you can organize the whole spreadsheet on that basis.
No. Okay. Yeah.
That's all I was.
Is there any other comments about the work? I mean, obviously there's more work to
Need some
do.
work
but-
from staff here to fill in some of the gaps, but I could do that.
Yeah, we really need your help on the schedule
Yeah.
thing in particular and the staff
We'll
leads
need-
thing.
We'll need the city goals and so on to fill that column in.
Well, the booklet.
And, you know,
Yeah, the
if-
booklet that we have.
I don't know how
Somewhere.
PrAC does theirs. The Historic Review Board has a very generalized one. I don't think it's as specific as this. Certain things are, but if they don't accomplish something within a given time frame, they'll make a decision to carry it over subsequent year, whatever.
Or not.
I have one more thing that might be added. I tried to condense our mission statement into 3 words that describe our work.
Really?
That might be helpful in this document. Advise, evaluate, and stewardship. And if one of those 3 words, in our responsibility, our role, we're either an advisory role, an evaluation role, or a stewardship role. So if that component of the mission statement was somewhere in each of
Oh, I
the
see.
lines,
Wait,
then we would know what our part, how it lines up with our mission.
Say those 3 again.
Advise,
Okay.
evaluate,
Okay.
and stewardship.
What we can do too with the work plan though is just take the whole mission statement and put it
And put
under
it
the
there.
title and
Yeah.
above the work plan.
Well,
You know what I mean? If you just,
Yeah.
you want to tie it in.
You know, I
That's a
almost
great
feel
idea.
like it's a category, a category block, but it's split in 3 things: evaluate, advise, evaluate, or stewardship, and to put an X, which
Mm-hmm. Yep,
does
which
this
one is- what's our
activity
role? Yeah.
meet with?
Mhm.
It really shows that we're a lot more. Well, we're very thinking anyway, but we're not only thinking, we're promulgating, we're producing stuff. here, okay.
I like promulgating.
You like that? I wanted to I laid that one on Richard, but I thought he'd go crazy. Promulgate?
How would you do that again in terms of where it goes? A little slow.
Well,
Would you create a new column or?
another column is split in 3
Oh, okay.
ways, with evaluate, advise, evaluate, or steward, and then put an X by,
Oh, I gotcha.
by the goal
Yeah.
by the activity that is
Yeah,
alluding
got
to.
it, yeah.
Because she picked that right out of the bylaws,
Yeah.
Good
mission
job.
statement.
So you create 3 columns.
I like the idea of having the mission statement at the top of this.
I
Yes.
think the full mission statement at the top. Otherwise, What you can do is, I think things can get a little bit cluttered if you repeat the same thing through the whole, because you're already going to have a lot of context and everything to begin with. Maybe you have the whole mission statement, maybe at the top of each page under the title, it kind of keeps you on track. You know, if you have any question if this fits, you just kind of go back to the mission statement on the page. If that works.
Yes, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
What are we doing here?
For the money, yeah, no.
I think it'll,
Thank you.
it may change
Yeah.
from portrait to landscape by the time we're done.
Yeah.
But it's already landscape.
It's already landscape. We might have to go to 14-inch.
Yeah, I think we're going to 14 inch.
11 by 17.
Excel
All right.
spreadsheet.
Hey,
Hey, go home.
hey, this is my personal printer. I don't do 11 by 17.
Okay.
Don't do 11
Can't
by
afford the
17.
paper.
Well, that's good. Yeah, those are
the
great.
ink, the papers.
I can't, I'll figure it out.
That's true.
All right. Next item. Are we good on this one?
Well, I
Yeah.
wonder one thing, Bob, you brought up a couple of times, and I really agree with, and that is to have one member of the committee, or maybe depending on the subject, more than one committee member be designated as lead individuals, and that really kind of means
I like that.
that we're asking
I like that.
members to decide which ones
Right.
they'd want to shepherd. And then once we've trapped people into saying that, then they kind of have the lead role for filling out all the blanks in that particular task, you know.
Pete, I've got one question. The revised bylaws we just approved, where would we go online with the city just to access those? Are those going to be, for the right addition of?
The goals?
No, the bylaws.
The bylaws? Well, the current adopted draft is on our NRC website,
Okay.
Yeah.
So the ones we
Yeah.
voted on tonight.
which
Good night.
we haven't updated in a very long time in terms of, but we need to, and provide a better link to it.
Well, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to say, if I'm going to revise the work plan,
Yeah.
I just want to make sure the bylaws I'm referencing online are the ones we approved tonight.
Yeah, it's, I'll show you where it is.
Well, I can just write it down. I just need to know.
It's on the orcity.org / I don't know. I'm going to look it up now.
Okay.
Oh, that's not it.
What?
So if we go to, you go under city government,
Yeah.
boards and commissions,
Yeah.
and then you go to that. There's several ways to get there, but naturally.
Sure.
And it's got a big long URL, but
Mhm.
that's, so, talks about membership,
Sure. No. Yeah. No. It's our webpage, but I just wanted to
and
make sure.
then the bylaws, current adopted bylaws are here on the related.
And so this is actually, since this is what we approved tonight, this is what we can go for.
Yeah, once
Yeah.
those are accepted by city commission, they'd go here.
Should we? I guess the question is, do we wait on work on the work plan until the city commission approves the bylaws? I'm just.
Well, I mean, I think as I understood our strategy here, we wanted to take our bylaws to the city manager first, and then
Yes.
the city commission. And the idea was to have at least a draft work plan
Yes.
with him, so it gave him the meat on the bones to understand what we're talking
Yes.
about.
Okay, so
even if it's still a working draft.
Oh, okay. Well, no, I can do that. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't going to be wholesale revisions to the bylaws.
No, I think we're,
I think your thing really matches if we knew what one is
Sure.
community involvement,
Yeah,
two
no,
is whatever.
We'll get that.
That was what
I
was
just wanted to
throwing
make
us.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But-
Well, thanks for showing where it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I think you really got a nice outline going there.
Pete, I have a question, actually.
Okay,
I'm just looking at this a little bit, and, this is going to be kind of a mess, in essence. It could be. But I'm not sure of the appropriateness of outcomes, evaluation criteria for what we're trying to do here. If you could take one of those and give us an example of what a deliverable might be, in terms of conducting NRC tour, I can see, okay, a tour would occur on June 4th or whatever. I'm not sure what evaluation criteria means here.
Every tour I would do.
You might put in need a trolley or a bus or something from the city, plus appropriate staff to man the bus. Things like that. Is that kind of what you're getting at there?
Well, I can't speak for Jerry, but I think like you have a tour, you have certain things you put in, certain things you leave out, but there's certain points you're trying to make in a education sense. So a lot of people, sometimes when you have a tour like that, you might give somebody a little form, ask them to fill out a postcard at the end of the tour. Did this meet your expectations? What was your things you liked? What didn't you like?
Right.
What would you like to see next time? Well, it doesn't have to be real complicated, but it provides feedback for the people helping organize it or provide the resources that it was a good use of resources and time, or it met the goals for the event.
Did you learn something
Right,
new?
but for resources needed, would you say like 2 staff members, tour bus, forms to fill out, evaluation forms to fill out,
Yeah.
and et cetera?
You need a timed plan, an itinerary plan. You need
Itinerary.
that. That's all things that you have to
Yeah,
develop.
itinerary and so forth, yeah.
So, yeah.
Is that what you have in mind?
Well, the resources too would be stuff like maybe the outreach plan, how we're going to advertise this tour, online or
Right.
through the media.
No, I understand that, I guess.
And
Some of these may not apply, to each category, I guess.
No, that's right. I mean, they may not all apply in a particular
And
task.
I think we probably X out, just put a big X across a category if it doesn't apply at all. But it's too hard to kind of customize a work plan, I think, for each individual item. It just wouldn't look very good.
Right. So we'll attempt to keep it as simple as we can, knowing that the public may want to look at this and go, and see what the work plan is. So,
Sure.
Do you know one thing I'm looking at this, Pete, is talking about kind of like an annual work plan. We're not really defining an annual work plan as a fiscal year basis, a calendar year basis, and I'm wondering if this work plan and we specify for individual items kind of the time frame we're talking about, because maybe it's some things are going to be ongoing, the code revisions of that, it's not going to be just 1 year.
it would fall shortly. Well, I think we talked about this in the
That's
last
it.
meeting.
That's what your timeline is. You have a column for timeline.
Yeah, I think you do it, but I think you evaluate your work plan both immediately prior to and after the city commission goal setting, but you also do it annually as well because you have to report to the city commission on the status.
Yes.
But I think the question I'm asking annually is that calendar year, fiscal year?
Oh, I think if we follow the current bylaws, it's supposed to be calendar.
Calendar.
Yeah.
Because we report to the city council
City-
on a calendar year's activity.
At the first
time.
meeting of the year
Uh-huh.
is what we're supposed to be hitting.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
How long will it take to fill this out, do you think, Pete?
Oh, we can probably do it before the next meeting easily
Yeah.
enough.
Easily.
Well, somebody has suggested a meeting with the city manager, and it seems to me this work plan should be part of that discussion.
Yeah, we need to do what we can get
What
done
we
on
can
it.
get done.
Yeah. I mean, it's as an example. I mean, we're not negotiating the work plan with the city manager. We're trying to give him an idea of how we see ourselves implementing our responsibilities.
I
See if
think,
he agrees.
Richard,
I would really strongly recommend that you have a lot of boxes filled out here.
I agree. Everything we
If you
can.
don't, you're just going to be taking in blank pieces of paper that really don't mean anything, in my view.
Well, I don't think anybody disagrees with you.
Right. But we have taken 14 goals and simplified them to 5 focus areas. That's a major accomplishment for this group. In the 9 years of this entity being around in some form, we've taken and bit the bullet and taken care of complexity and simplified.
I think I can't guarantee And again, I'm not in a position where I can fill out every square on every page, but I can go ahead and update the action category and fill in the stuff, kind of a brief heading for the responsibility category, and get that out within 2 weeks, given where we are right now.
There you go.
But I think it'd be really helpful to get everybody looking, once they receive that, to get everybody else looking at these different categories beyond those.
Yeah.
Because we're going to have different ideas of how you're going to evaluate something, or what kind of outcomes are associated with different things. But I'm willing to do the responsibility category and the action category. I don't necessarily have enough information on the timeline.
I'll take
Pete
care of
said
the
he
one.
can pull that together probably in the same time frame. Yes,
Yeah,
Pete?
I mean, it's going to be just, bookend dates, because
Sure.
the actual timelines for each of those processes have,
Understand. They can only be as
Yeah.
good as they are right now.
well, within each timeline, there's a whole series of dates that have to be hit for various hearings. And we're not going to put that in this work plan.
No, certainly
No.
not. And
Yeah.
beyond that, I mean, some of them are going to slide too.
Yeah,
That's
and
why I
some of
said, I mean, this work plan won't even stay the same for a year because dates will change.
Yeah, I mean, if it is part of a formal legislative process, we are going to know the date of the first evidentiary hearing, and we're going to know approximately at least when the city commission hearing for sure is, the first one, and those get continued a lot. So, yeah. Just,
One thought, for purposes of discussion, and we're certainly focusing in primarily on a 12-month period, how we're going to spend our time, but it seems to me like things that we know about that are beyond 12 months, we should be spelling those out too. Maybe it kind of depends, maybe there's a part 1, part 2 or something here, but it seems like we want to capture everything we know about, even if it's 2 or 3 years down the road.
I guess the question is that something that'll come from this group, or is that just something out there?
Can you repeat that, Doug? Sorry.
Oh, I just said, if there are tasks that this group intends to take on, and they know something right now about the schedule for doing those things, there's no reason not to reflect them here, even though they might not be done by December 31, is there?
Oh, no. I mean, if you don't have an exact date or timeline for it, you can still.
Or even if we do, and that date happens to be the middle of next year.
Just
I
say
mean,
on-
it's still reflected.
ongoing.
Yeah.
That's the way the Historic Review Board operates a lot, because they're making policy recommendations, but they're also reviewing developments on a rolling basis. So, yeah.
Now, one thing I don't see on here that could be on here perhaps, I'm not sure what category it would be under, is development of rapport with the city.
That's a good point. I mean, this exact process we've been talking about here, discussions with city staff and the city manager, I think that's a big priority task for us this year.
It's under, I think
should
it
be
falls under 4.
Yeah, it should be under 4, even with the revision.
Fill that out a little bit, yeah. Or, I mean, expand it a little bit, or however you want to say
Yeah,
it.
4 would be exactly it.
And you know what I think is, once I send this out, if folks want to add new rows that aren't here, if they could just make sure when they get that done to share it with everybody else, because, even particularly under number 1, just the other activities other than a tour, what activities or projects
Yeah,
are people interested or committed to doing per year?
we were talking about the Ivy Ball, Ivy advocacy, and Waterboard Park. I mean, Ryan loves that area. Like to see it different than covered with Ivy.
Yeah, back to rapport just for a second. If you're going to meet with a city manager, that would be a good way to start out the meeting, perhaps, to talk about some difficulties. But we have a plan, and here's how we want to implement the plan to see if you can get his buy-in. Not the work plan, but the rapport development plan.
Yes.
Okay.
know, I just, you know, I know there's a lot of negative feelings, you know, about things that have gone or perceived things anyway, whether or not they have actually gone on or not. Some have, some haven't, I guess. But I think you need to take a positive approach to this. And one way to do that is possibly coming up with this rapport plan, or whatever you want to call it. But try to keep it positive, but focused on what the issues are. But have solutions for working with folks on the issues.
Hey, Pete,
Yeah.
what about a joint summer raft trip between the City Commission and the Natural Resources Committee down to Clackamas?
Sounds good.
How about over the falls?
No, no,
What if 102 people don't come back?
wrong watershed. No, I'm just wondering, because sometimes let your hair down, keep your swimsuit up, and just have kind of a good time.
It's not a bad idea. That reaches a lot of the.
Builds community.
Other
You
concerns.
could point out some issues along the way. I think it might just be
It'd be nice to
educational.
invite the Parks and Rec people to join us.
Now, I have to figure out how many boats we got.
It would,
Every
yeah.
boat, one oar.
I know David is the manager has utilized Willamette Joe boats about 4 times, I believe, to take people to the falls, but they don't necessarily. There's another way to do this, I guess. It'd be neat to get them on a vessel, all together, or as you say, individually in rafts. You know,
Or a
In
couple
group-
of people,
groups.
you could assign like at least
Yeah.
one natural resource person has to paddle in the same boat, one city commission member, and that way we can learn to work together.
And Planning Commission.
I like your idea though.
And an
It's
urban renewal
interactive.
commission.
You know,
And parks.
3 men in a tub.
We could,
Butcher bacon.
I don't like to be skeptical, but I think our relationship problem is happening closer at home than the city commission, though.
I think it's a good suggestion. It's a very concrete action.
Wait, I tell you, Pete, there's a President Bird is the over
who would you have in
on the
mind?
1210. They actually have a mayor's canoe race. I know because I had Craig Dirksen, who's now on Metro,
Yeah.
was my paddling partner racing down the 12th. We actually had to come around and paddle upstream.
Well,
We got beat by a lady in a kayak.
well, I want you to know that I organized the first ever dumpster derby between 5 mayors at Clackamas Park, and they all went down the boat ramp in dumpsters to see who could beat each other, and they all ended up in the river. And I never did that again.
That was a good start.
All right.
Part of the cleanup effort. You know, we thought that'd be a cute idea to put them in dumpsters. You know, well, it was a bad idea.
So,
We're not putting you in charge
is there
of
some
that.
kind of a consensus on a timeline for getting kind of a draft work plan and meeting scheduled with the city manager, or what are you thinking?
Well, I would try to get a staff input, finish up this work plan in a couple of weeks. At the same time signaling to the city manager this week that you guys have made a unanimous request for a meeting.
There you go.
And that at that meeting, you will present him with the amended bylaws and work plan. So I think 2 weeks out is reasonable,
Pete,
but, that could change.
I'm thinking if it's going to take me a while just to get this, and everybody's going to get this and look at it and provide different input, and you have to reintegrate that and get everybody to buy off. It's hard to picture that happening before the next natural resources. I mean, look at the stuff with the bylaws and stuff like that.
But we don't have to have this necessarily done to meet with
You
David.
don't have to have the
No.
work plan done.
You know,
You got your bylaws.
We need to show them something.
Yeah.
You've got something to show them right now.
Maybe if we have 1 or 2 lines filled in.
Yeah.
The more
Yeah,
meat,
I
the
feel-
better, but I don't think
The
it
fact
has to
that
be
you've
done.
got a matrix here, which you can use and say that you're all pretty much in agreement with your responsibility categories, and you're going to fill this in as you go forward.
And here's some examples of tasks we've thought our way through, if you've got several of them.
So
Yeah.
I'll leave that up to you guys. How quickly do you want to move?
Well, I'd like to see this before the end of. Like to see this before the middle of June, personally.
Well, I think the question
About the next
or
meeting?
before the next meeting. I'd like to
Well,
see.
you count back from your city commission, your city manager meeting. Let's assume that.
Well, I guess the question is, it's hard for me to picture this getting finalized or approved by everybody without at least having some discussion at some point at our next regular meeting. You know, it's just hard. If you want to have it really at a functional level where you can really go by it, it's going to be more than just filling in like 2 or 3 columns. We're going to need to think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're going to need to.
Yeah.
I guess
well,
what I'm trying
that'll
to
be
do.
an ongoing thing, so.
But I guess my question is, how close to the level of the bylaws do we want this to be before we're comfortable with it?
Well, remember, they're different in the sense that we're talking about taking these bylaws to the city commission for adoption. We're not talking about taking the work plan to them for adoption.
Right.
No,
The
your work plan
plan's
is
our
your
own
own.
document.
Yeah, this is just to prioritize what we're going to do.
Yeah. And it will
We did
always
that.
be a draft.
Our first cut was by cutting our goals down to the 5. And then this is carrying out those 5 goals, a method for doing that, and prioritizing it. Because each project will have a different importance to us. And that's really the ultimate goal of this, is to set those priorities.
What if we?
So maybe what you ought to do is,
What about trying to set the priorities at our next regular meeting? Because you're going to need some discussion to set priorities.
Yeah.
It'd be hard to do that online.
just I would add that, you know, the city commission, the PRAC has presented their work plan at the last city commission meeting, and we need to do that, I would say, within a month or 2.
Sure, I think that's doable.
Yeah, okay.
But that doesn't mean we
To the
can't
city
meet with the
commission.
manager before our next meeting, if that's
Right.
possible.
So I would say city manager within a month, city commission within 2 months.
No, that's all doable.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a question on the formatting. And when you look at the responsibility column, you got, 1A, 1B, and so forth and so on. 1A of what? You need headings.
That's
for
That's
each
going
one
to
of
be
them.
revised. We've talked about
That was
a fair
referring
amount.
back to the old set of bylaws that we talked about the last meeting.
Right, yeah, I understand what you're saying, but what's the heading for
Right.
number 1, for example?
Right.
For number
I
2?
believe.
For number 3? In other words, a heading.
Well,
What would it be called?
we're going to include that with these revisions.
Yeah, one will be community involvement, for
Okay.
example. And we're going to come up with a 2 or 3 word description that summarizes what that
So,
priority
yeah,
is.
I just asked you about the headings,
Well,
like.
that's exactly what
the
I'm
heading
saying.
for the 1 is community development. Number 2 would be what?
1 is community involvement. 2 is going to be where we're talking about city plans in some way.
Yeah.
And then there's land use applications that we have to go through, which is 3.
You understand what I'm getting at here? Just
Yeah.
simply.
We
one
want something
heading
other than
for each one
numbers.
of them, each group?
Yeah, we want something other than numbers. We already, you may not have caught, but we did talk about that
Yeah, we
already.
can do that.
We need a 2 or 3 word statement for each of the 5 categories.
And you'll
And
see that in the
subsets.
next revision to
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
draft.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's-
we'll definitely be doing that, so it's,
I think we're in agreement. We're not
Self-explanatory.
disagreeing about what we want there.
Yeah, 4 is going to be good communication, most likely, and so on,
yeah. And, yeah, I'm doing that now, but.
Yeah.
And then, Bob, for what it's worth, I think it's just fine when you're ready, if you wish to call together the small work group again to go over things with you and go through a quick discussion. I'd certainly make myself available.
I appreciate that. I guess what I'm thinking with what everybody's sharing with me tonight, though, that
You think
since
you've
we
got
got-
enough?
Well, I think maybe it's a time to kind of open it up because our subcommittee members can still comment on it. But it'd be good to get the people who weren't on that looking at like the same way we were looking at the bylaws
Sure.
tonight.
Your call. I was just
Yeah,
offering. If you feel
sure.
like you're kind of overwhelmed with some of this, don't hesitate to ask for engagement.
No,
by
definitely
others.
appreciate that. But I think, basically it's just, it's getting 1 and 2 done and really asking folks, I think, before the next meeting to consider the priorities aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think 4 would be good communication. That would be orderly meetings and
Sure,
communications with staff and so on.
Now, Pete, the version you're doing, is that going to be the same, like next to the
I'll
bylaws?
email this to you
Okay,
Yeah,
tomorrow.
yeah, please.
all right.
Yeah. And it's just, I'm just putting stuff in, so.
No, what I'm doing though, Pete, on some of these is
Yeah.
breaking down, things are complex,
Yeah.
breaking them down, not trying to have like one heading
For anybody else.
for 3 or 4 things, because it gets too crazy with timelines or staff assignments and stuff.
Actually-
Sure.
Thank you.
Oh, this is the salmon bake.
I'm realizing that 4 and 5 are actually really similar. Both of them use the phrase "good communication."
Well, one's more like, or making sure we have the meetings with PrAC,
Right.
and the other one, I'm sorry.
And whatever presentations we need with the city commission and some sort of interaction with planning.
Do we have a number 5 responsibility?
Yeah. Yeah, it was right at the
Didn't have a
beginning.
number. Because 4 was conduct orderly meetings and
Right.
communication, and 5 should have a meeting. a
Yeah, it was
number.
coordinate with Parks and Recreation and Planning and City Commission. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I won't get
All right.
overboard here.
Okay. Okay. So I think
Save.
I think we've done enough on this.
Thank you.
It's 9:30. Do we want to skip the presentation on the geologic hazard overlay zone
I move.
for next time?
Yeah, I'll
got it
just
right
tell
to-
you, what I attached was the map from 2010 that the City
Mhm.
Commission adopted, which I described earlier.
Yeah.
And I think I included the red lines to the code that was made back then, but if, just so you could see what Nancy Kraushaar, who was the city engineer at the time, and was also well-versed in geologic hazard and engineering mitigation. So she was very confident when revising that code. So you can take a look at that. As I said, we've got many more resources at our disposal now, and that's what we need to reference in the new revisions in the code. Okay. All right.
Okay. Does anyone have a member report they feel impelled to give?
I just handed out the hard copy on the climate change stuff.
I did want to mention that the Clackamas River Basin Council annual meeting is tomorrow night down at the Museum of the Oregon Territory at 6. And it's not a fundraiser exactly. We do have an auction and things like that, but it's a $10 salmon dinner, so which is half of what it costs to put it on. So, but anyway, if anybody's interested, that's ongoing.
Are they baking it outside, or?
Actually, they are, but not in an open fire like Jerry does.
And you notice this thing I handed out is
Yeah.
for a fundraising get-together the Oregon City Watershed Council is
Right.
going to have at the Environmental Learning Center at Community College on Saturday, which includes a silent auction and stuff like that. And,
Okay.
and as an aside, I wasn't kidding about the T-shirts. They're actually available to anybody who wants one. They'll be available Saturday, but you can also just corner me and I can get you one.
Yeah, those are great Lamprey T-shirts. I have not had a chance to get caught up on Metro's climate change initiative, Bob. So I'm not sure where they're at on that. But
It's not going away, I'm not worried.
yeah, no, for sure. I believe the first city commission meeting in June, we'll just have a little ceremony getting the second Tree City USA award that we got. I need to find some resources to buy some more signs, because we only have the 2 up right now for our Tree City USA. So I'm going to see if we can get Public Works to pitch in on that and put a few more signs up at gateways into the city so that people are aware that we are a functioning Tree City USA for the second year running.
Hey, Pete.
Yeah.
We got a question. Do Oregon City High School have any shop classes where they?
Oh, yeah.
I'm just thinking they might be willing to do.
A year from now, they're reopening the old Jackson campus, the shop, and Building C is being turned into a parts manufacturing business that's run by high school students with industry mentors. And it's open, there'll be evening
Interesting.
classes, it'll be in partnership with the community college and a bunch of local businesses, and they will have the machines to do that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure
So a
the
year
uni-
from now.
The unions would be upset if we outsourced it to the high school. But
Well, they would, these kids go into the apprenticeship programs, they're trained
Right.
for that, and they're actually, Joint Apprenticeship Trades Council was one of the partners.
that's
for
good. That's
it,
cool.
so- But yes, I understand what you're saying.
Well, yeah,
I get
and
that, yeah.
they're also helping Parks out, building a stage at the EOT
Mm-hmm.
once they get through planning. It's part of the education process.
There we go. Mhm.
And there's a flood. It's in the floodplain, so we need to make sure that the stage doesn't float away. Although we could design it that way, should we need
Pontoons.
to? Yeah.
Pontoons.
But yeah, that's a great program. Britt Tucker's construction program there. And that's on one of our reviews. Let's see, we don't have any other natural resources overlay district land use applications in right now. Just the one that we talked about, Union Pacific Trolley.
Yeah.
Bridge restoration. We've had a lot of zone change applications before the Planning Commission, and they are meeting with significant neighborhood opposition, even for a small zone change right now. So I think the level of pushback from the community on zone changes, and I'm being very candid here, because I'm a planner and I understand the need for urban growth boundaries and that sort of thing. So from a professional standpoint, upzoning within the urban growth boundary is good land use policy, in my opinion, and that's what we've got on our books. But at the same time, we have to balance that with concerns for the neighborhood. And I'll just say for the record that, we've not been, the community is not happy with rezoning from R10 to R6. They seem to be more happy with rezoning from R10 to R8. But
Well.
even in the especially in the Park Place neighborhood, even a rezoning from R10 to R8 was met with major opposition. And with development community, developers do not want to be in an untenable public hearing situation, and so and the Planning Commission is also tending to listen very sympathetically to the neighbors at the moment. So we're working through that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think we'll probably see more of that because of the nature of living on the edge of the urban growth boundary, especially as if annexations within our concept plan areas do move forward, and the citizens will continue to vote those down unless the petitioners of those annexations are very savvy about politically supporting their annexation process, irrespective of what the city approves. So we're seeing that.
We,
the voting down of the annexations, is that they don't think that the people carry their own weight with extra expenses? Is it anti-growth?
The elections,
Yeah,
yes.
I'm just trying to figure out the motivations.
a lot of the motivation is opposition to being told from Metro or LCDC that you have to have a certain density.
Yeah.
And which, it does, I understand the reasons for that higher density is because you can get more people on less land, thereby leaving more open space outside of the urban growth boundary, and that's the whole idea. But at the same time, people don't want to see that higher density especially when they move to an area because it didn't have that, and then the city comes along and cuts it down to R8 or R6 from R10 and so on.
Yeah, and I understand that if you're a
Yeah.
longtime resident of that area.
Right.
But what we're seeing is recent new residents having the same opinion And I think part of that is because they don't do their due diligence. And I understand that realtors do say a lot of things, but a lot of people do need to talk to their planning department before they make a significant real estate investment to see what stuff around them is zoned. And what stuff around them is not just zoned, but what the comprehensive plan designations long range are.
Yeah.
And where the urban growth boundary is, and what the county is doing with respect to designating urban and rural reserves, because that all has an effect. And I can't, that's just one of those things that can be a hard lesson to
But
learn.
having said all that, if you live in an R10 density neighborhood, even if you bought your house just last week,
Yeah.
and you're looking at the public notice that the city wants to rezone the area across the street from you from R10 to R6, it's not surprising people are not happy about that idea.
Sure, but this isn't the city initiating it. It's a
No, I
property-
understand.
Yeah.
I just say, when
Right.
when a land property owner, new or old, reads
Right.
that public notice,
Change is a shock. Yeah.
their reaction is negative.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're absolutely right. And it's not much of a consolation when you say that, design is the key to good urban density, because that doesn't mean the same as open space. It doesn't mean it. And so we have to be sensitive to the need for parks and open space and trails in our dense urban communities. And I think
Certainly,
that's
even if
where
Oregon City can't manage the ones it's got already.
exactly.
I shouldn't have said that, should I?
No, it's all part of the dialogue. I hear you. So anyway, thanks. I got off track, but
Okay. Well, if that's the end of it, I'm going to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
At 9:42.
Hey, we beat our last time by 3 minutes.
All right. Things
We
are
must
improving.
have a sweet spot. huh?
Yeah.
It's called